Okay, hello and welcome to RJA Revealed Pool 2. This is just going to be the same deal as Pool 1, just different songs. You can see them on screen right now. So yeah, I don't really have much to say in this introduction. It's just going to be the same format, looking at the path, looking at the notes, and then a performance of each song. So we'll dive straight into it. The first song is Waves 120. Okay, hello and welcome back to RJA Revealed. We finished Pool 1, so now we're going to move on to Pool 2. And the first song is Waves at 120% speed, but of course the path doesn't change at from regular speed. So yeah, we'll take a look at that right now. Dive straight in. No need for introductions, even though I just did one. Alright, anyway, 3 phrases. We got this phrase right here, which luckily these first 2 phrases don't have any whammy, which is, there's a lot of whammy in this song, so there's very few phrases that don't have any whammy. These first 2, neither of them do, but anyway, we whammy this as much as we can, which makes this first activation actually pretty awkward and almost impossible if you use the XP button to activate and whammy at the same time. So obviously when it's impossible to do that, I go for a tilt act. This artwork was a bit weird because I was whamming at the same time. It's that sort of thing happens in immediate results as well, but not the notes are a bit slower there. I think it's just one long sustain where I'm whammying and then tilting. So in this one there's a little more action going on. So it's like you're doing 3 things at once. Yeah, well, 4 really. You're hitting notes, whammying, tilting, and activating. So I guess the tilting and activating is basically the same thing though. But yeah, if my mouse would like to stop disconnecting, yeah, we're just aiming for this blue note. It would end up being a little bit earlier or a little bit later most of the time. So that's the thing with tilt act, it's never going to be exact. But it's good enough, really. If you get good enough whammy, you'll get at least the majority of this fast bit, and ideally the activation will end right here before this phrase. And you get everything fast and nothing slow, except for this stuff, but that's just a bonus really. So yeah, first act, a bit challenging. Hardest act in the song though, which is good news. So this next phrase, it's just a whammy phrase. It's immediately after. You have like literally no risk of having too much star power and hitting this orange note, so you can just whammy the whole thing, no problem. Just some more basic phrases, more whammy phrases, and then the second activation is pretty simple, to be fair. So the way I remembered it was, we're waiting for this quad zig. It's kind of distinct because you don't often get this pattern without the yellows, the GRBO zigs, so we're waiting for that, and then our cue is this descending triplet here, and there's a break after these 5 notes. So yeah, we hit these 5 notes, a very very short break, and then we activate on the blue. So yep, exactly where it tells us to activate, no problems there. And yeah, we're whammying this next phrase. There's some short sustains, but it's mainly remembering to whammy this note right here quite intensely, because there's a lot of fast stuff going on, and we want to get as much of it as possible. And there is no danger of overlapping if you activate here, because obviously this being, I guess it's not the early whammy path, but I'm pretty sure even if you got full early whammy, you probably wouldn't overlap there. Maybe you would, but with an Explorer there's absolutely no risk of overlapping this phrase, and you don't want to overlap this phrase, it goes without saying. So yeah, this activation pretty easy. Next one, so we have this phrase and this phrase, and an immediate act. Now this one's a bit annoying as well. These notes here, just because of these 3 blues, the latter 2 I'm pretty sure the latter 2 are both strums, so that's a little alt strumming bit. And we gotta remember this is 120% speed as well. Even though the BPM is slow, this is still relatively quick right here. So yeah, getting my finger prepared and doing a little alt strum like that is not too easy. So it's not trivial, but it's also not that hard. And yeah, it's just preparing my finger to activate immediately on this note. It's really lucky that this phrase right here has no whammy at all, otherwise it'd probably be another tilt act, or I would have to sacrifice some whammy. So yeah, not too bad, but probably the second most notable activation in this song. So yeah, and there's only 4 activations in this song. It's quite a long song, you'd expect more, but for some reason there's only 4 activations. The slow BPM might have something to do with it, but yeah. That activation, no overlapping or anything, and it perfectly ends on this grace note here. And yeah, there's no whammy, so literally I've been able to get that exact before. Not too hard to do. And then we get to the final activation. A couple of whammy phrases, and then it says to activate on this yellow here, which I'm going to tell you right now I didn't do. And the reason I'm not acting here is because we have an overlap phrase that's pretty tight if you activate on this yellow right here. In fact, I'm willing to say it's going to be extremely tight, because otherwise it would tell us to activate on this blue. So I opted to delay it, of course, and I went for the red strum because the strum is easy to remember, and it's like the only strum in this whole thing, and it's also right at the beginning, so we're not sacrificing too many notes. We are sacrificing a decent amount of points, maybe like, I don't know, 1,000, 200, 1,400, something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're scoring like 520k, it's not that much. And it is really necessary to get this final act because it's the final phrase. Necessary to get this final level up because it's the final phrase. So, and you can't whammy this enough and get enough star power to activate again. So yeah, and instead of ending here, we'd end, I think, on this yellow-blue grace note. So we get some notes in exchange for these notes, but I think we're probably still losing about 1,000, something like that, maybe 800, but probably 1,000. So yeah, and that's the path. Optimal score says 521, so I'm pretty sure I was getting 515, maybe 516. So we're losing about 5k, and considering, you know, how many notes are in this song, it's not like a trivial path or anything like that, and the activations aren't in obvious places. So yeah, it's a pretty decent alteration, and I don't think I ever lost this song, so yeah, worked ones for me. But we will move on to the notes.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes of Waves, or I'd say we're going to take a look, but it's not going to be too long because, to be honest with you, I never took this song into practice. I never missed it once. I sight read FC'd it in the random match against UCOG, and then I just decided, well, clearly I'm good enough at it, so we'll just learn the path, and that was it really. But having said that, it does have some very missable parts, so we'll just take a look at the solos, I assume the sections are. So right there you have a pretty fast mini trill. Along with a pretty fast lick after that. So there's a few things in there that could trip you up. Obviously the mini trill. There's that one random blues strum that's in there that is worth remembering. And then obviously that whole lick is pretty quick. But honestly, if you're just warmed up, I think the best thing for this song is to just be warmed up enough so that your one-handing is fast. Because there's nothing you need to learn here. So yeah, I'll just play it again, I guess. I honestly don't really know what to say here. Blue strum. There's 2 quints down there, but if you just slide, it's fine. So solo 1 isn't the hardest part anyway. So we have the quiet solo, and there's nothing hard in the quiet solo. There's a lick at the end that's quite fast, but it's not really worth mentioning. Now the bridge is missable. There's a random red hammer on there. I remember at least once in a match I strummed that and I was like, oh my gosh, why is that a strum? I thought it was going to overstrum, so it's definitely worth remembering that that's there. And it's a down strum as well, so it can put you off kilter. So double down after that. Not that it really matters because it's in like 15, 16. But anyway, this is that part of the bridge. Now, normally I would tap something like that. I don't know why I decided not to. Maybe it's because, just, I don't know, a relatively quick transition from strumming to elbow strumming. It's not that fast, but, yeah, for some reason I decided it wasn't worth tapping it. And I would normally standard tap something like this. And as a result, it sort of became more missable because you see these bits where it goes... Well, it starts off on 1, but like where it goes up to a yellow, blue, orange zig, and then back down, but then it goes up to a blue after the yellow. Stuff like that kills me. I don't know why, but yeah, I just generally anchor as much as I can for stuff like that, and it normally hits. But of course, it can miss. That's the only thing. Otherwise, it's just, you know, sliding. After the first half, it's pretty free because it's all ascending stuff. But yeah, that's missable. Obviously, it's probably the most obvious fast part of the song anyway. But the hardest part of the song, I'll just select solo 3. I don't know exactly where the hard parts are. Obviously, we have this one phrase that I downstrum through. Well, I don't downstrum through it, I alt-strum the double blue. But it's while my pinky is extended over the select button, so I don't have that, like, all my fingers underneath the strum bar, which makes it a little bit trickier, I guess. But this is the hardest part. It starts off relatively slow, but quite a few random strums, and especially this blue here is especially weird placing for it, because immediately after it is a mini yellow-blue trill. But yeah, 3 random strums. Just remembering that they're there. Remembering that there are random strums at least. I don't even remember that there's 3. Just prepare for the strums. In fact, the green starts it off, so the green is barely, isn't even one. But yeah, just mini trills really. The mini trills are the parts that are missable there. But I think mainly there, if you prepare for that blue strum and anchor in yellow as soon as you hit the blue strum, then that'll pretty much, it'll hit. Well, and then it's just a case of being fast. I'll just play through the rest of 3, because I know there's one more shreddy bit, which isn't too bad. 3B is really where it's at, if you will. 3B and bridge. So 3C is obviously nothing. Nice miss there, buddy. Alright, there is one part I remember now. I think it might be the end of this, so I'm going to set A position. It's the grace note part. Yeah, so that part is probably best to downstrum it all. Definitely. It's just so much more obvious, because then you're not starting a grace note part, like a Dream Genie part on an upstrum. Alright, the upstrums can throw you off for some reason. But it's worth remembering that that's there for sure. And then we have this part, which isn't actually hard. I think it's basically just 16s actually. But there is this pattern, which, if you can see there, I'm staying in second position and moving to 1.5. So my middle finger is always on the yellow there, and that's definitely the best way to do that. That shredding bit there is just stuff you would see in the bridge. So yeah, just this pattern again, because it's definitely not worth doing it in first position. That can be awkward. So if you will, I'm sliding my finger down on the green, but I'm not actually sliding, I'm just moving it, because there's no red before it. But yeah. And then, just the final thing, remember that this last lick is here, because I forgot about it once and almost missed it. Just a quinzig, but it is there. And that's the end of the song. As I say, I don't have anything I did really to stay consistent. I threw a few ideas out there, but as I say, I didn't actually practice this song at all because I just played it once and I was fine at it really. But having said that, we will do a run of it right now. Okay, so that was Waves 120. I got 517.7. I think that's a bit better than I would normally do. I don't know why that is. Maybe I just had better whammy. I think I had some incidental squeezes, so maybe that's something to do with it. But anyway, yeah. That was Waves 120, and our next song is going to be Wisdomiard, so we'll see you in that.
Okay, so here we have the path for Wisdomiard. Now, Wisdomiard's a pretty short song. I think it's like 2.5 minutes. So there aren't too many acts, but I think I'm right in saying that it has the same number of activations as Waves, which is like double the length, and we just went over that. But 4 activations is probably what I'd expect for a song with this many notes, and that is of this length. So we will get into it. So first activation is maybe not exactly what you'd expect. So we have our 2 phrases. There's no whammy at all, so there's no worrying about whammy. And then we have a long string of 16ths here, basically. And you might think, okay, so why? So this is all 16ths for 4 measures, and we got 2 star power phrases. So surely if we act on this note, we'll just get that can't not be optimal. It doesn't get any faster than 16th notes. Well, sort of. Now, we don't activate here because we miss out on a potential 200 if we squeeze one of these notes. So there's a break after at the start of this 5th measure. There's a missing note here. If we activate here, there's no point at which there's a break again. So you can actually squeeze in an extra note either side. Well, it ends up being 1 note if you squeeze both of these notes. So we end up with a potential 200. And it's not a harder activation, so there really is no reason not to wait until we get here after the break and then activate. I think 99% of the time, probably not against Nick, but like any other time, I was probably ahead if the player activated here and I activated here. Just took 100 points right off the bat, just like that. So that's the first act, not what you'd expect, but an easy activation at least. Okay, so now we have our first whammy phrase. There's a double open here, which makes whammy in this note a little tricky, but not that tricky. But it's worth pointing out at least. Second activation, the only difficulty with this one is remembering exactly where it is. So we have this part where it goes quiet, doom, 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 or whatever. So I would wait until what is essentially the second cycle of it, which starts right here. This is like the build-up bar, or measure. So it starts here, and then we're waiting for the point where it goes do 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 do. So that way do 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 is where we want to activate on this note right here. So I was just waiting for the point where we saw this yellow-blue chord. There's 2 before it, but if we just remember that it's like over halfway through the cycle, then we'll always activate here. There's no squeeze. There is a bit of whammy, so there is a chance I wouldn't get this note, I guess. But yeah, so that's the second activation. Just remembering where it is. More of an audio cue and visual cue for me for that one. Third activation, simple phrase, and then we have our measure long whammy. So we want to whammy that as much as possible because this next activation I think might be the most valuable. It's either this one or the last one. Whamming as much as possible. And obviously we're activating over the fast part and we're getting the whole thing in along with a little extra. So I didn't activate right here because obviously I'm not going to get full early whammy. I instead activated on this orange, which is kind of easy to remember because it's a descending quint. It's on a bar, so yeah, that's an easy visual cue. So we're activating there. The only thing with activating here, either here or here really, is I tap this bit with the double greens elbow strummed, but I tap the top note. So transitioning from here to here in 200 BPM bars is kind of quick. but I never ended up screwing that up really. But that is very, and obviously the notes themselves are missold, so this one is definitely the deal breaker of this song, this one activation. And of course, if you activate earlier on, you're missing out on a lot more points. Like, I don't know exactly what the deficit's going to be, but it's just makes so much more sense to activate right here. And of course, that little bit, this whammy right here, enables us to activate almost at the start of bar 116, measure 116. So yeah, ideally we end right here, and then we are almost immediately into our next phrase, which is a whammy phrase. So basically, as soon as this is over, we have a 1 measure break, and then we really want to be whammying straight away, just remembering the other phrases immediately after, because we do want to get a lot of whammy in this phrase, because there's no whammy here. And as I say, this next activation is also pretty valuable. Some chords in it, quick bit here. So yeah, and well, luckily for us, remembering where the activation isn't a problem, because it's immediate and it's, you know, a relatively decent gap from this note to this note. So yeah, immediate activation, just get as much as possible in. So, and there's no tapping immediately after the activation, so that's no problem. Our final act is simple. And yeah, that's Where's Domiot's Path. Not that trivial, to be honest with you. It's a short song, and the notes are probably more interesting, but I would say the path is at least, you know, a little bit different than what most people would expect, especially that first activation. But yeah, well, speaking of the notes, we will get onto it right now.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes of Wisdomiat, and there is a few things to say about this one. Quite a few bits where I did things to stay consistent, a few methods developed, even from pretty much the very first section. Actually, the second section, I tell a lie. But here we are, the second section of the song. I'll just play it one-handed now to show you what it is. Now, so orange walls going into a blue wall. Pretty awkward to do one-handed, for me at least. See, that's trying to do it in third position and slide down. Doesn't really work. So, and considering this is all taps, there is an obvious solution, and that is just to do it. Just tap it. Why wouldn't you tap that? And I don't even necessarily stay in first position for it all, actually. So you literally have infinite time to get ready to tap these notes. Well, from the song begins, really. And then the transition out, it's not really a transition, but it ends with this extended sustain, red yellow. So if you're in first position, after you tap the last blue, you literally just do that. Works either if you go up to second position or just stay in first position the entire time. Perfectly fine. So that's just something to make it 100% consistent. That's what it's all about. But anyway, after that, drop one. I don't really have anything to say, it's just 16ths. And it's all one-handing. Now there is a double yellow there, which obviously you just strum, and it's a non-issue. So that's that bit. There isn't anything to say, really. It's just one-handing and sliding, just like everything else. Not surprising enough, I have stuff to say about this section, or I guess break B, not break A. First of all, remembering that there's a random strum note there in the midst of those taps. There's a number of times I've forgotten that that was there, so I just need to focus there and remember, hey, there's a strum bit here. So yeah. So you hear that? I'm just strumming every, I think half bar or bar, either or. It's quite a fast tempo, so it can be. Every bar. That way these awkward parts where it goes this chord followed by a yellow followed by a red yellow are no longer awkward. and you don't have to do a random strum in it because you're already doing a strum every bar, so it just falls naturally. And the only time you don't strum every bar right there, you don't really need to. And then this grace note, probably shouldn't do that because the yellow doesn't fall on the measure. So it changes it from like a mini, like where the hell do I strum, to just keep in rhythm basically. And you just only need to worry about where the notes are, and you don't need to worry about exactly where the strum is. Because obviously when it's all taps, it's up to you, to your own personal preference. You could do that not strumming at all easily, but for me it threw me off a little bit at least with that red blue to red yellow chord bit. So yeah, just another little thing. And then we have this drop 2. Starts off just these sweeps, which you're just gonna at least are one-handed. Right, I'm going to set their position right here, because if you remember from the path part, this is where the activation is. So after this note, I would start tapping. Now I'm just going to, I'll let it play. It's awkward, and first of all, those quintsigs with the strums are strange. Like, there isn't really any pattern like that anywhere else in the pools, or it rarely happens just anywhere in any song, to be honest. And then you have these triplets that are not linear. They're not literally just green anchor, red anchor, yellow anchor. That's just sort of all over the place. They go from ascending to descending, which makes alt tapping more difficult. So that was just out of the question for me. But we'll start off with these zigs. So obviously you could one-hand them, but I obviously opted to well, I forgot about the last one. As I said before, yeah, I elbow strum the greens and just tap the orange. As to where I start anchoring, it's normally the blue, I think. I just anchor the blue and hit the orange on top. Or maybe it's the yellow. It's either the yellow or the blue. And then it's a case of just timing your strum, really, after that. Tapping that. So that's the first part of it. Okay, then we have the triplets, and now with these, at least in the matches I played, I standard tapped them, which I think resulted in a 50-50. I FC'd it once and I missed the second time. So standard tapping this, I'm just going to set the position right here, is really awkward. Like, it's not actually very consistent. I'd like to hit it at least once though. You see what I mean? It's sort of awkward. At least when it gets to the descending bit, so actually I'll slow it down so I'm not confusing myself. So this is what I would do. Even 50% speed is weird. And a strange thing happens, but like the ascendings are fine if you just pay attention to where they are. But when it gets to the descendings and the zig at the top, it starts becoming less triplets and more like, you know how GHP did Fast Solo A, where you literally just alternated between the blue and the yellow standard tapping. It becomes a little bit like that, and forget that it's triplets. And it doesn't have to be that way on 50, but on a full speed it definitely gets like that. And otherwise, it's a lot of anchor shifting, like without even thinking, to be honest, and position shifting. That red note is probably the hardest single note in it that I just missed, because it's quite a fast anchor swap. Okay, I'll build it up. That's how I hit it. Now I'm getting it back now. And then an elbow strum out. Okay, so that's as much as I can possibly explain that, because it is convoluted. And now I'll do it. I'm not going to try and do the full section because I'll end up probably embarrassing myself, but I'll do it at least with the zigs. So it also helps to pay attention to where the highest notes are. So there you go. Paying attention to where the highest notes are can definitely help you with that. Now, alternatively, I never did this in a match because I never played it after the second match. But I realized, like, this isn't actually very consistent. And we're playing a tournament where no one can see how I'm playing these notes anyway. So yes, the alternate is moosing, which makes it just turns into RNG basically. Now there was a specific point at which I started to moose, so I didn't. You can see I standard tapped the first few triplets, and where I would start moosing is after this last red, blue, orange, and then we start doing quad zigs until the oranges go, then we swap down to the first position. So yeah, and this is probably more consistent if you remember when to start. You see, transitioning from a standard tap to moosing is also kind of strange. You see, because my finger wants to stay here rather than hit this blue note. And now if you think too much about it, you'll miss your cue. But you can see I started spamming late and it still hits. But as I say, it's not 100% consistent. And that is sort of the theme of this one part. It is what maybe probably my least consistent part out of Pool 2, outside of maybe the ladders and dads. So yeah, this thing I can't say I'm overly consistent at, but at least there was a couple of things I could do to try to be consistent. I wasn't just flailing through the whole thing. And as I say, I didn't actually moose in any of the matches, but yeah, it is a viable method, and as I say, this is for consistency's sake, not for, and I said this before, hey look at me, I play Rock Band 3 style playing. But anyway, that is that section. And believe it or not, we're still not done. In fact, bridge contains the next part I want to speak about. And in fact, it's not. This is going to take like 1 second as soon as we get up to it. It just happens to be in this section. So actually, I'm just going to set the position. I'm going to go from here from now. 5 strums. It's 5 strums. It'll never overstrum if you do 5 strums. Even if it eats one of the notes, it'll still work. See? Because it's Clone Hero. Right, and what I did there is not what I did for this part after. Right, so let me break that down a little bit. Yeah, and that looked like a stumble, but that is what I do here. So what we're doing, we're just tapping the chords while we're anchoring. So 1, 2, bump, 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 bump. So yeah, bump, 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 bump with the anchor switch. One hand for a little bit. When it gets to the orange note, a double tap. And that second one is more awkward because of that. And I do tap this red moment, if I didn't say already. You might even notice that I'm actually hitting the orange with my left-hander anyway, but it just happens that way. I still do the double tap, because it's how I got consistent in the first place. But if I don't press the orange, the method works exactly the same way. And with that one, it's literally just first position. At least with the second one, there's no anchor swap. In fact, even with the first one, I don't necessarily do an anchor swap. So now we'll speed it up. And the rest of it is kind of awkward. There's these random tap strums, I guess you would call them. You just need to know that they're there. You see a couple of extra strums there when it turns into blue-orange chords. Every blue-orange chord there after the main first tapping bit, strummed. The orange notes after, strummed. Just like that. And the strum after the chord is because I'm still anchoring blue, and it won't overstrum that way. And that's how to get consistent with that part at least. And this has been the longest explanation in notes so far, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, there is a lot to say in this like 2-minute song. So many things going on. But yeah, that's that. Now I'll stop talking and start playing. Okay, so that was Domion, got 287, 386. Pretty much every time your score is going to end in a 6 if you hold all the sustains. I think about 288k flat is the best I ever got. I don't know if I got that in a tournament. This is average, yeah, good score, fine score, nothing really wrong with it. So yeah, we'll move on to the daddy now, which is Gazelle. Although it's not literally the daddy, but you know what I mean.
Okay, now we have Gazelle full act. Now this one is a bit of a challenge. There are a lot of activations, I think 7 or 8, and none of them are particularly conventional. So it might take a while to go through this, and forgive me if I mess anything up, because even right now it can be hard to remember exactly what's going on, especially when the song itself changes constantly. But anyway, I'll try and be as quick as possible, but it probably will end up being about 10 minutes. So yeah, first activation, we got nothing really going on until the activation itself. So we get 3 phrases, and then after this third phrase we have some ascending sort of pattern things. But the way I would remember this is I would wait for this red yellow trill to come up. It's pretty slow. It's like there's one earlier on, but that's in a phrase anyway, so there's no way you would get it confused. And obviously there's this one, but you don't even have enough star power. But this slowish red yellow trill, and we're just waiting for this ascending chord. That's all it is. So there's a gap from like not in time, but obviously there's no red note, so it's sort of obvious and easy to identify where this chord begins. So we can see it coming from a mile away and just activate on it. And that's how to do the first act, that's how to remember it. This overlap is no problem at all, and ideally we will squeeze in this note and be mostly optimal. There is a whammy there, so I don't think I would end up getting this chord probably. But yeah, first act done. Second activation, also in a bit of a weird spot, maybe a little bit difficult to remember. So we get 2 phrases, both of them have a bit of whammy. Now, to distinguish this, we got these hooks, these 2 quick hooks, and then it goes into these chord ascending bit basically. This is all taps, so we don't need to worry about strums or anything here, at least. So yeah, 2 fast hooks, you can't miss them, and just the red blue chord. That's it. It's the second chord that shows up, so there aren't like a million chords, and you're just waiting for this one to show up. It's the second chord, so it's kind of, once again, not in an obvious spot, not on a measure or anything, but it's easy enough to tell exactly where it is. And yes, second activation ideally will end after all this chord pattern stuff, and this is a really valuable activation. It's got 3 note chords and obviously all of this stuff. A lot of the activations are pretty valuable. I mean, even this one is. This next activation is the most valuable in the song. The good thing about this one is we don't need to worry about whammy because we get 4 phrases. So yeah, just hit the notes. These phrases aren't even free. Like, you see this? I think this is a fast lick. This one has a blue to red, yellow, blue chord, which you can overstrum or miss if you anchor in every note beneath it. And this is just a chord bit. But anyway, the activation itself. This yellow-blue trail is relatively quick, and you see we want to activate just before the end of it. Not here. If we activate on measure 100, we will overlap this phrase, which spells disaster for us, because, you know, there's just... if we basically waste the entire thing, notes don't come in for another measure and a half. So yeah, this is a vital non-overlap, and also a vital phrase, vital activation, because, I mean, it's all chords and it's fast chord trills. You see, we rock it up from 372 to 500,000. So this is worth like 70,000. If you don't activate here, you're down by that much. So, since this drill is pretty quick, you would think that you'd want to tap it, and I think I tried to tap like the first half of it and then start one-handing, because it does get a little bit slower. 113 BPM, it's 1 BPM, it's not that much. But yeah, tap as much as I could and then bring my hand down and activate somewhere near the end. I didn't activate for this note specifically because it's a long trill and it's hard to tell exactly where this note is. So somewhere around here, ideally it would be right here, because we can notice the the slowdown between the blue and the yellow. But if you activate on the blue once again, you're risking overlapping. So yeah, just somewhere near the end, before it's too late, and then we get the vast majority of all this. We end up maybe a note or two shy, but still getting tons of points. Maybe the most valuable activation in any song, this one right here. Don't quote me on that, but I would not be surprised. So yeah, that activation, very important. And nothing is quite as important as that. Maybe the last act is really important, but these next acts are generally just you get 2 phrases and activate. So boosh and boosh, no whammy. This one's easy to remember. There's a long break after this green-red sustain chord. So yeah, just after that grace note, boosh, straight away. Don't want to activate any later than that because we don't want to overlap here. And there's pretty much, it's going to look close, but I don't think there's much of a chance of overlapping this phrase. Like even if you squeeze ridiculous amounts, because this path has no early whammy, and there's no whammy in these phrases, so I'm pretty sure it's impossible to overlap if you activate right here. So yeah, simple enough act. Next one is a 2-phrase instant, so it can't really, you just need to know when the phrase is coming up, and you just remember that it's in the acoustic guitar part. I think it starts right here, gets acoustic, and the phrase is right here, or something like that. Maybe it's not exactly there, but I'm pretty sure this is an acoustic guitar part. So immediate act, nothing to remember, no overlap, no nothing, simple. Another 2 phrases, 1 whammy there in an easy spot. Maybe a bit more difficult to remember the other 2. It turns, after we get this phrase right here, it turns to a slow like waltz part or something like that, and it's like just piano on its own. So we just need to remember it's after 2 measures, and we can remember that it's after this double green here, and I wouldn't strum the second green even though they're both taps. I don't know, just made it less likely to overstrum right there. And because I'm focusing on the activation, it's just one less thing to think about. And so yeah, we activate on this orange note, which is on a measure, and it is vital that we remember about this activation, like when it's coming up, because once again it's very possible to overlap this phrase, which is something we don't want to do. It's not the worst overlap in the world, because our next activation gets 4 phrases, so you'd end up with 3, and you get a bit of extra army that you wouldn't get, so you'd end up with like 80% bar, but still this last act is valuable, so we really don't want to miss this activation. Right there, orange note after the only part where it's 2 greens in a row. Okay, and as I said, the final activation we get 4, so we don't need to worry about whammying this, not that it's a hard whammy. And the way to remember this, it goes back to the dramatic, like, I don't really know what to call it, but this chord bit. And then, so after we get the phrase, we get this like string of 16ths, and we're just waiting for this to end to go back into this part, and it's the second time this happens. So we see the red yellow, and then we get ready to activate, boosh, and we overlap, not a tight overlap, and ideally end on the very last note of the song, which is a bit rare, but that's pretty cool. And yeah, that is the path for Gazelle. A mouthful. I feel like I can't speak anymore after doing that. But yeah, this song is pretty mental in both notes and in path. So yeah, we'll get onto the notes now, and there's a lot to say there as well.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes of Gazelle, and oh my gosh, this song, there's just so much going on in every aspect. The path is mad, the notes, I could talk about like almost any section in it. So yeah, well, I'll just point out the stuff that I feel is necessary. As far as like hitting certain chords, and like positions for all of that. That's going to be a bit unnecessary to go into too much detail. So I'll just talk about those things that were problem spots for me, and maybe some of the parts that weren't problem spots, but could easily impose a threat, if you will, to the FC. So nothing so bad until, and these sections don't help. Contest prelude. In fact, this section is one of the biggest trouble sections of the whole thing. So there's a few things to say here. First of all, hooks. Then these strums. And then this thing. So there's 3 things in this one section. Before that, it's not too bad. So, as far as the hooks go, you would think tap, but I don't tap because there's an activation immediately after them. So instead, what I'm going to do is just ghost a note before them to make them easier. It actually only applies to the very first one. So, right, and these things, you can see what I'm doing. I'm letting go completely, and I'm using the first note of the 3 as a hammer on. So, and for some reason letting go and pressing back instead of just switching the frets makes that a lot more simple for me and less confusing. And then that. So the first 2 first. This. Now I thought that was fine. But basically all you do, you don't worry about ghosting notes between them if you do, because you can anchor below them anyway. And you just sort of just gotta go for it. I don't really know. Try and stay in second position as much as you can. So probably only switch to first position when you're hitting the green reds. Okay. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because, as I say, it just happens for me, and I don't know why anyone would struggle with it, but anyway, I'm not going to say too much about that, in lieu of sounding like a bit of a knob, so we'll move on. Next part now, there's some fast fretting before this, but I'm not going to talk about it because you just fret it. Now, C, D. So these little castles, I guess the OG term is. I definitely opted to tap these. I'm staying in first position. Maybe shifting up to second for the yellow bit. And these happen 3 times. So it's worth remembering that it happens 3 times. And right before the 3rd time is this stupid phrase where you definitely want to strum that 1 chord, because that's so awkward in one hand. So you won't be strumming that chord because it's a blue followed by the chord. So if by chance you're anchoring the 3 notes that are the chord already, which is a chance because naturally I slide up to do that, and you don't strum the chord, as you can see I just missed. And that's a phrase as well. Before the most valuable act. So that strum, although it makes the transition into tapping a bit quicker, it's just so worth it. For the consistency's sake. That was the case of me just shifting the anchor too early. And this stuff here is a little bit awkward with the ladders, but as I say, it's just one handing, so I have nothing to add. Anchor shift, and then this time it's this instead of the trill bit. Okay, so immediately after this we have Shattered Illusion. I don't know what these section titles are honestly, but yeah, starts off with some trills, self-explanatory. Just standard tapping, they aren't really fast enough to be all taps. I say as I miss, I'm looking away, that's why I'm not on tempo. Don't make me eat my words, please. Right, so that one speeds up quite a bit actually. So it's what you just need to pay attention to how far in front of the beat lines. And of course, if you're going to be overly cautious, you can alt tap and just over tap it. But anyway, at the end of the yellow-blue trill, as I say, because of the path, I start one-handing. So I'll just look for the measure, and start one-handing. Okay, I'm going to set the position. So yeah, I'm one-handing here. One hand the first couple of these, then start standard tapping. And all this is just the same thing, but with anchor in red. Okay, so those two are fine, pretty much. And then we get to that fast one. Different chord. I'm pretty sure I missed that before because I thought it was something else. So there's a random yellow-blue in there after this one. So remember that's there. One hand that, then start this. And if you're doing this, or I guess if you don't like doing the between 1 and 2 on the tapping hand, you can literally just straight alt tap it. But there's no use trying to be completely accurate on this bit. I don't think. It doesn't really matter. Because you definitely do not want to miss these notes. You don't want to miss any of these notes because it's under star power, but like these ones in particular, because it could lead into missing the star power phrase. And this is the most valuable part because it's the fastest note. And it goes without saying, but the chords can be treated as a trill because they are taps. Okay, so they're the trills and the chord trills. The section after is also worth talking about. Excuse me while I shift my leg position. So this is what I like to call where the do I strum? So, or I guess where the hell do I strum? Alright, WTF dis, which basically mean it's exactly what it says. Like, where do I strum? Because it's a mixture of strums and taps and hammer-ons, and it's kind of hard to tell between the textures. And it's been a complaint about Clone Hero, especially when there's star power phrases in it. It's almost impossible to tell. But the key with this is just playing it a few times and you learn. It sort of alternates. There's a couple of times where you want to be strumming in the tap notes here. So these orange. So there's 2 strums and then 1 at the bottom on the green. One strum there for that double orange. And then after that, that's fine. There's like 4 times you want to be strumming in the taps. And that's it. Maybe this blue note here because it's an activation. And I'm going to press select because that's what you do to activate. So yeah, that blue note maybe, but the other ones are probably necessary strums. And that's the WTF this part. Now, after that, we can take a second and go to the acoustic solo, and much like earlier on, there's a hook here, I believe in this section. Or the one before. Right, it's in here, I think. So it's exactly the same as the hooks, which was the first thing I spoke about, except this time it's hammer-ons. And for goodness sake, I just press the wrong button. It gives me a chance to speak, yeah. So instead of it being all taps, the hook starts with a strum, so it's way more, I guess, obvious where it is, even though it's kind of obvious where the first ones are as well. But yeah, you can't miss it, and as long as you remember it's there. Okay, I guess this is where it is. And you can do the same thing where you're already anchoring blue. It is pretty quick. I think it's quicker than the other 2. So this is more, it's less of a challenge to hit the notes and more of a challenge to remember that there is something in this acoustic guitar solo that's missable. But it is kind of awkward. These kind of hooks, especially when they're really fast, are awkward. But yeah, remember the strums there, pre-anchor blue, and this is okay. Maybe miss it one every 10 tries. And yeah, that's that. And then there's only one more thing I want to talk about, and that is the very last section. Actually, the very end of this. This thing here. So this is just the stuff that's earlier on. Nothing too bad here. Then we get this bit of pretty fast fretting right here. So instead of tapping that, I opt for a slide method. So just slide down to the green after the, I guess, mini trills. And it probably, you could probably even ghost an entire quint there where the yellow note is. But that sort of makes the trills a bit more awkward. So that's awkward. Then we get the last section, which has the same trill as the bit before. So then you stop, and then I just tap those two notes. So I'll do that again. You have a larger break, so there's absolutely no problem transitioning into it. In fact, if you want to make it even more consistent, you can start tapping before this even comes up. Then the rest of that is basic on humming. And also I do this in first position. As opposed to the other ones, I was like this. But doing that, you would need to slide down in this little fretting bit, which I find a bit more awkward. So do it in first position. I can tap these two notes and I'm already in the right position, and I don't need to shift at all. Okay, that's Giselle. They are the main parts of the song, I would say. There are other things you could miss, I guess, but that's the main parts. I developed things to get more consistent at, I guess you could say. But let's see it in action now, and I'll do a run. Okay, yes, that was Gazelle, and yes, I was nervous for some reason. The song just, it really doesn't stop. It truly is, I don't know, one of the hardest ones to consistently perform well on, because it just throws so much at you. But anyway, 818k, the usual. I hope it was my best score, because I thought, I thought it was better than that, but 818. So we are good on Gazelle, and we can move on now to the strum songs, which start off with the Sentinel 110. So, yeah, I'll see you there. Okay, welcome back. So here we have the Sentinel, the Path of the Sentinel. Now this one has 4 activations. I don't stray too far from the path it gives here, but there are points where I do change things up, so we'll go into it. First activation. No whammy in these phrases, obviously, because there's no sustains for most of the song. But yeah, it says to activate on a measure. I opted to just activate immediately. Now, I probably should have looked at it a bit longer, because I didn't realise that this activation right here is on a measure, and I just assumed it was randomly, like somewhere random in these strums, and I was like, I can't be bothered remembering that. But as it turns out, it is on a measure, so that was probably a mistake on my part. But the good thing is, the activating here, it probably won't change the game at all. I think the only thing you get here is maybe an extra squeeze right here where the activation ends. So activating here didn't really matter at the end of the day. None of the matches went down to the wire by like 200 points, although they could have. But yeah. So the first activation, just immediate, made it easy to remember. Not that this is particularly hard to remember, but you know what I mean. So yeah, maybe a mistake activation there, but fair enough, that's just the way it is, and that's the way it was, should I say. Next activation. Regular phrase here, then we get some whammy. There's only, I think, like 2 whammy phrases in the whole thing, and these 2 right here. This one's the main whammy phrase though, because we can see the BPM is quite fast, so we do want to whammy this because we'll get quite a decent amount of star power. And it's sort of during strumming, or the sustains are just after alt strumming, so as I say, whammying after alt strumming isn't the easiest thing to do in the world. But it's not too bad here because it's simple and linear, unlike the rest of the song. It's just, you know, 8 strums, 4 strums, followed by a sustain. So that's fine. The next whammy is so short it barely even matters, but it's right at the end of this, where it goes into this rhythm here, for like a couple of measures. Sometimes I went for this whammy, sometimes I didn't. As I say, it's so short, it doesn't really matter that much, but it can... this song does have the potential to give, like, really close scores. I was saying earlier that it never did end up going that way, but it definitely had the potential to. So getting this extra whammy and maybe an extra 400 points in the next activation could be worth it. And this whammy isn't that hard, all things being said. It almost seems a bit pointless because of how short it is, but it is the last note of the phrase, so probably worth getting it. And I did go for it, I think most of the time. I think maybe the first match or the first couple of matches I didn't bother. But yeah, then we actually get the activation after getting these phrases. Now this one, it says to activate here, I activated right here on the measure, and it's not very easy to tell where this measure is, because as you can see it's just literally, it's just all the same chord in this weird rhythm at that. Now, I count 4 cycles of this rhythm before the activation. So the rhythm goes da 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 da. So right here, this is the start of another cycle. It throws you off. It should probably be in 5/4, but it's in 4/4. And this is the start of the second cycle. So I was just counting the rhythm 4 times. So it goes. So basically, every time we get these 2 yellow blues in a row, the second one of those yellow blues is the start of a new cycle. So here's the 3rd cycle, and here's the 4th cycle. And this is the start of the 5th cycle. So if you look through all that, you'll be able to see it matches up right here, and this ends up being the start. And that's an easier place to remember where to activate, doing right here. Now it's obviously not a perfect activation, because right here you get the end right as the chords end, but I don't think you really end up much worse off. You might lose 400 points, and that could be the deal breaker. But at the sake of not activating too early and screwing up and not getting the overlap, because the overlap is relatively tight, or activating too late and getting these notes which aren't worth anywhere near as much, I think this was a decent choice to activate right here. And it's on a measure, so you can, even if you do lose count, you can sort of play it by feel, because this is the only, well, I guess it's the third time a double yellow blue lands on a measure. So we got right here, and right here. So that's where we're going for, and that's where I did activate pretty much every time. Activating just when you feel like it might be right, and not having a set point in these chords is not really a good idea, because as I was saying, you could easily activate too early or too late and screw it up. But yeah, and we'd end up, the activation would end up out here instead of about here. So you'd probably have the potential to squeeze in this note anyway. But it would probably end here, realistically, not giving us the chance to get a squeeze. So that's that activation. A little bit annoying, a little bit of a mystery as to where you should really activate. Because I think people in the tournament were saying it's like, oh, it's the 40-second yellow blue or something. Like, no one's going to count that. There's no point. So yeah, just go for the measure, and it's alright. Next activation. Yeah, there's no more whammy. It's literally just that one activation that has whammy, by the way. So we get 3 phrases again. This one, once again, is pretty much right after the phrase, but not quite. It's right here on this note, and this note is extremely awkward to activate on. So I went for this, and you can tell where this is because, well, first of all, it's right after the phrase, and second of all, it's the second set of 3. Then you can obviously identify that before the notes come up. So activating right here, and no chance of overlapping there. And yeah, once again, we'd miss out on maybe a note at the end here, so it's not that much of a deficit. And as far as this activation goes, I actually did go for this middle note activation once because I was behind and it was against Nick, and I ended up missing after, otherwise I would have won, which is the annoying thing. But yeah, as obviously didn't end up mattering in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, this activation is really weird if you do it on there because it ends up being on an upstrum. So yeah, I just went for the easy route most of the time and went for the first green of that set of 3. Now the final activation, once again I didn't do it exactly where it's supposed to be, because it's kind of like from this point right here, measure 86, it's literally just all blue notes, and this second rhythm comes in at measure 90, and then that's it for the entire song. You got 26 straight measures of it just being this. So yeah, a bit hard to remember this exact note unless you count cycles or whatever, and I couldn't be bothered doing that. So I just went for activating on the phrase, which is an easy place to identify, and once again, you might be missing out on one note, because activating here, phrase might end up ending here or something, or maybe a bit later, maybe it ends here. So yeah, just activating here, once again, maybe missing out on 200. And that can be undoing on this song. The optimal is 439. I don't know what I was getting before 36 on my practice runs anyway. And you see I'm sacrificing 200, 400 every now and then, which on a song that had the potential to be really close, it can screw you over. But even having said that, just knowing that you can alter your set activations by one note, like I knew this activation was right here. That's nice zoom out. So I knew the actual activation was this note, but I just went for here. And I saw I was behind, so I was like, right, so we'll just go for this activation. So having a backup activation if you're behind can help. As it happened, that was the only one I actually knew where the real activation was. But yeah. So this song was more path heavy than notes heavy, but we will obviously look at the notes as well, and I'll see you there. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes for the Sentinel. Now this song, there isn't really any fretting at all besides these little slider parts, which I don't think anyone had any trouble with. So it's just going to be talking about strum rhythms and learning them in this case. So we'll get on to it. Intro. This one's not so bad. So, and that's one cycle of it. Doesn't change from that until a little bit later, but that's a different section. So what we have, if you remember, duh, 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 and then you're just doing that in bursts of 2 strums, so you literally don't even have to play them fully fledged, you can literally just burst strum them like this. And then it ends at a seemingly random point, but that just happens, but yeah. So at every single point where there's a short break, your strum bar will be up. It ends on an up strum. And I don't do any reset strumming at all, I literally just alt strum all the way through. Because of that, it makes it easier. So that's the intro, not bad, I don't think people were struggling with that part at all. This part's a bit weird, first one here. I'm at 100% speed. Excuse me. Right, the first part, still not any harder. Okay, now we're back on track. So first one here. Once again, all of it ends on up strums, and you can do it in verse 2, but it's just a different rhythm, so it's I don't remember exactly what it is, or something. Okay, so once again you can just do your burst strum of 2 trick, and it becomes free. You're just counting every 2 notes, and it doesn't get any longer than like 3 strings of 4. And then it changes in verse 1b to this 5-3 bit, which I think is a little bit harder anyway. You really need to pay attention to where it changes to 3s. Especially in the open note bits. Doesn't help that basically in the middle of that, one of the 5s ends up starting on an up. So yeah, the last 2 ones that are strings of 5s, they start on ups, so you can sort of remember that to see if you're on the right track, or you need to change. Anyway, and the open note part's the same, it's just opens instead of reds. So that's the first verse, first part of the song, I guess you could say. Then we don't get strumming like that for a little bit. This part's all easy, I don't really need to say anything about it. Pre-bridge is fine. So bridge A. Right, this is a rhythm you should learn, right? Now, it's in 5-4. The measures tell you it's in 4-4, but really the rhythm itself, even if the song's in 4-4, the rhythm itself is in 5-4. So yeah. Dun 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 dun. Well, the last one would be the start of a new cycle, but yeah. Just doing that over and over again, burying it into your mind. Every cycle starts on a down strum, so you don't even worry about that if you alt strum all the way through it, which is what I do. Activation, as I was saying. You don't even need to accent it, really. I don't think I would accent it. The good thing is it's all in the same note as well, so it's literally just a case of you can close your eyes and just do the rhythm, and that's literally it. If you remember, it's in cycles, and it's in 5-4s there, you'll be able to identify it when it repeats, and it won't seem like just a random rhythm. And that's how that bit goes anyway. And so that ends, and it ends normally, and we switch to this rhythm, which I think is maybe a little bit harder. But yeah, once again, it's a dun 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 dun. It's a bit faster tempo. But once again, it's just there's nothing to learn other than just doing it over and over again until you know the rhythm and you can't do it wrong. Once again, the cycles start on down strums, so you can alt strum all the way through it. And you can burst strum these little twos. I don't think I would though, it just makes it... makes your hand a bit too animated if you're bursting them. So if you really wanted to, you could do the note and the note before it and the twos, or the note after it if it lands that way. You could just do them as threes, so... I mean, I haven't done it this way, so it's going to be a bit weird. Dun, 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 dun. So used to the rhythm now, that's what happens. I don't know, if you really wanted to, but that's obviously not what I did, so yeah. So if you get those two rhythms sorted, and this is all under star power, so it's kind of important that you do, you won't just be strumming through it randomly and like, because you could try and like finagle your way through it, right? I guess that works because it's clone here, you can literally just drum at the same tempo. Unbelievable. There you go. Easy. Even more consistent. 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's the thing. You can go over them a little bit, so it's definitely... I wouldn't recommend that unless you literally can't keep the rhythm at all. But anyway, I wonder if you can do that with the first part now. This is Clone Hero in 2021. Anyway, Bridge C is just the tapping bit, and that's fine. And honestly, verse 2 is pretty easy as well. Even like the vocals are doing the rhythm as well, so it's just a lot easier to know what it is. I'm pretty sure, once again, there's 4 sets of 3 strums, so it's going to be on a down each time the cycle repeats. So that honestly, I don't think anyone's struggling with that rhythm. The hardest part of the song for me, intro revisit, is literally just the intro again. So outro for me is the hardest bit to know exactly what to do, especially considering there's an activation in it, and I didn't do a tilt act. So I'll just play it now in a sec. So it's not quite like the intro where you can do bursts from the 2, because you have these sets of 7 in, and once again we go back to Wonder. That rhythm. So you can't do your burst strums of 2 unless you want to end on a 1 down strum, and then you have to, after you hit that down, you immediately back into the burst, so it doesn't really work. So I think unless you want to reset strum every single time, or at least reset strums after the 7, I opted just to alt strum through the whole thing, even through these large gaps. It just, because the cycle does reset on a down strum like everything else, so you have that going for you, and you're just a lot less likely to overstrum by accident with Explorer bounce back or whatever. So yeah. Just me miscounting, doing 5 for some reason. So yeah, doing that, and then there is the activation, I think, wherever the star power phrase is, which does mean you have to do this while, at least for me, I have to do it with my pinky extended to the button, which is a bit harder, but you know, there isn't really much else can be said. This is just how I did this, but you just look and see. I didn't even learn the rhythm, to be honest with you. I just looked and saw where there was a 7 and where there was a 4, and that's all you need to do. But yeah, I wonder if there's a way to choose it like you could with the other ones. There's no way. I don't think there's any way you could do it. You'd have to strum too fast, yeah. No. Good. That's a good thing. Alright. Anyway, enough of me messing about. We'll do a run of this song now. Okay, so that was a Sentinel 110, 436k. So I was saying up to almost 439. So missing 3,000 points there. Just fair enough. I think this was about what I was getting. I couldn't remember before, but now it rings a bell. This 436 number. So anyway, now we'll move on to the next song, which is The Thing. Okay, so here we have the Thing, and the path for the Thing. Now this song, it's really short, and as a result of that, it only has 3 activations. But it was a little bit tricky, I would say, to at least sort of remember where the activations were. It's probably the key thing. And having said that, it was probably only the very first activation that was any a problem at all. Otherwise, it's just knowing whether you're activating on an up strum or a down strum. And you don't even have to know that, it's just preparing for either situation, because the way I play the song, I either reset strum or alt strum through it, so it could change every run really. But anyway, let's get on with it. Activation 1 has no whammy in these phrases, so that's a nice start. And kind of awkward to remember where it is. So what we were looking for, what I was looking for here, I was looking for this yellow blue sustain. So the second time this yellow blue sustain happens, we activate, except I don't activate here. I activate on the orange blue chord, just because it's on a measure, as usual. Missing out on, I guess, a squeeze or something. But yeah, actually I feel like this would result in the same thing if you squeezed on this note rather than squeeze this note. So maybe it was just as good. So yeah, activating on here. There is a phrase in the middle of this that we need to overlap, and it's relatively tight, which I feel like is probably the reason I activated here. So yeah, there's a phrase that ends, I guess, here, which is at the end of the fourth measure of the activation. So yeah, gets our activation and overlap consistent, and doesn't seem to really lose any points anyway, to be honest. But this whammy here, and every whammy in this song, is kind of really short and awkward, because you could be whamming on an up or a down strum. So I went for the whammies, but I didn't really care how good they were. The most important part was activating at the right time. Okay, activation 2. We got another one whammy here, and after this whammy I stopped having my finger over the whammy bar, because next activation, next phrase has no whammy, and the next activation is immediate as well. So yeah, an easy act to remember at least. You get 2 phrases, then it's an immediate act. So this one's pretty easy at least. And then we go back to whammying immediately after this activation ends. Well, not immediately, but in the next phrase. In the next 2 phrases, in fact, both of them have these short whammies, and these are the hardest whammies, I guess, in the pool. Not that that's saying much. There aren't many cases where you have a hard whammy, but these ones are pretty difficult to get, like, the optimal star power from them. And that's why, as I said, I didn't really care how much star power I got out of them, as long as I was whamming them at all, which gives you an extra little bit. Next activation, 3 phrases, and we activate on the last phrase. It's telling us to activate here, but instead obviously I delayed it one more, because it's easier to do, because it's on a down strum. And yeah, that's basically the only reason. It's on a measure, so that makes it even easier to do. And we overlap this, and that's the song. So yeah, the last 2 activations, besides the whammies, they're both pretty easy. It's the first activation, and remembering where that is the only difficulty really with this path for this song. And there isn't going to be too much to say about the notes either, but we'll go on to that now anyway, so I'll see you in that one. Okay, so now let's take a relatively brief look at the notes of the thing. A lot of this song is something that I can't really explain, because it's just paying attention to the notes. There isn't much I did to stay consistent, to be honest. I just relied on my ability to pay attention, and maybe knowing about the odd thing that changes up. So we'll go into it. There's at least a few things I can say. So intro, there is nothing. Verse 1. So what I do, I basically, most of the time, I'll alt strum through the whole thing, unless I decide to do a double down to make a specific set of notes, you know, all change on down strums, if you know what I mean. But with stuff like this, I would literally just alt strum all the way through it. Except for the sustains. So after sustains, I would reset strumming. And there's little things like that, you see, where there's just a random double yellow into the red, and it ends up being 3 strums. That's where the paying attention comes into it in this song. So yeah, and I'm doing this, oh my gosh, twice in a row. How professional of me. And another one, a bit like the way it ends, you need just be aware that there are tempo changes, and you can sort of hear it in the drums most of the time. The drums speed up and then the guitar goes faster to catch up, so you can prepare for it that way. Pre-chorus, now there's a little thing in here that's obvious. So there's that little thing where it starts off with 16ths but then goes to triplets, 8th triplets I guess. So yeah, with that one it's always the same, it doesn't change up. It's just you do your 4 and then you switch to 8th triplets, and it ends on a down with the chord after, I believe. So that one's fine really, if you know what it is. And you see there's just so many random variations. Like there's a part where it's a red-blue chord followed by 4 strums randomly, and then there's just random gallops here and there, and it's just the sort of stuff, as I say, you just need to be paying attention for. One thing I will say is that I do a double down into this blue-orange chord. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but just starting that measure just makes the whole thing seem on a down. Just makes the whole thing flow better for me. You can still get it wrong. And it just changes so often. But anyway, chorus. There is a discernible part that could be challenging, and that's the chord change. So I just stay in second position for that thing. No shifting up to the 3rd or anything. You could do that, I guess. Shifting up to 3rd, which could work, but for me, I'm comfortable enough doing it in second position. And I guess one little thing, right at the end of chorus 1B, you see where there's the random yellow hammer on. I double down that. Just because I do. There's nothing else to it, I just double down it. Just look at those two. So, I guess I could point out that most of the time you have a note gap, a 16th note gap before like the end of a cycle or a phrase or whatever you want to call it. So you see there's a gap before the sustain. And again, and again. So it's very rare that it goes straight 16th strummings into the sustain. So you have your choice of doing a double down or strumming the sustain at the end there. Otherwise, as I say, just paying attention. I can't reiterate it enough, you just gotta pay attention. Right, and this part here has, I guess, some new things. Once again, not straight alt strumming. Now that's a part that I did remember, was that there was a random triplet strumming bit there, which is sort of uncharacteristic from the rest of the song. Otherwise it's just, once again, just straight alt strumming through it and identifying where you have to start and stop. But yeah, there's nothing new in the rest of the song. It's sort of hard to comment on a lot of it, on what you would really do. And I say it for the like 5th, 1000th and last time, you just gotta pay attention to the entire thing, all the way through the song. You can't let up, it's only 2 minutes of your time you need to be paying attention for. But yeah, we'll do a run of this song now. Okay, so that was the thing. It's over before it even starts, really. But yeah, it's 274k. I don't know what optimal was. I forgot to check when I was doing the path part, but I don't think it'll be too far off. Probably like 3 or 4k maybe. Obviously, it's almost impossible to get great whammy on this. But anyway, yeah, that was that, and we'll move on to the last strum song in this pool, which is Farmer Says. So we'll see that. Okay, so here we have Farmer Says and the path for it. Now this is another really short song, about 2 minutes on the nose, but this one has 4 activations. Most of the time you're getting 2 phrases and activating pretty much straight after, and this one was kind of annoying as far as paths go. I banned it against Nick at least. I don't know if I banned it against anyone else. Maybe I did. I feel like actually I banned it against everyone but like one person. But yeah, I didn't like this path and the activations in it, so I banned it sometimes. And we'll go into the reasons why pretty much straight away with this first activation. So we get a phrase, and then we get an immediate act after a whammy. So that's great. I mean, straight away, an annoying activation. Pretty much impossible for me to whammy this and activate on this note using the button. So it was either a case of no whammy, or, like I did, a tilt activation. So we're going for this whammy, and pretty much right at the tail end of the sustain, trying to tilting as fast as we can to maybe activate on this open note, maybe a bit earlier. And this song isn't that hard to FC, so you know, missing out on extra notes can screw you over. Which is why I banned it again, because it's not that hard to FC either, as well as the path being kind of annoying. So straight away we have a tilt act after a whammy. I don't like them, so it's already kind of annoying. But straight away the second activation is the same thing. So we get this chord, and straight away you want to activate on this note. So I did the same thing again, another tilt act while whammying. And there's nothing I need to say there, it's literally the same activation as the second one, just the notes are a bit different. So yeah, we get this whammy, activate here. We don't overlap here because there's no way you would, unless I literally missed the tilt, which didn't happen. And then we get some whammies that aren't followed by a phrase at least, and these whammies are really short as well, so they're a bit like as a thing, but it's like back to back sustains, and you're not alt strumming, so they're a bit easier to get full whammy out of. But yeah, and this is sort of where you can get screwed over again with at least this, and the path I generated not being an early whammy path. If I got like too much early whammy out of these sustains, I would overlap here. So the activation tells us to activate on this note, which I did at least once. I think in the match against Preston, I activated here. And in practice, I had never overlapped here, so I assumed, alright, I can't overlap there. But in this instance, I must have whammied them. I was trying to whammy so good that I ended up overlapping here. So, after that faux pas, I decided not to activate here and activate on this red note instead. Which, I ended up about the same part, ended up ending it about where it tells us to here. So I was actually going for a better activation than the path tells us to do, thanks to the whammy. So yeah, this is like the only instance where I actually end up using a better activation than the path gives me. So yeah, otherwise there isn't anything to say, it's an easy activation, it's just the case of overlapping. And we finally get another, like a sustain here, that's the same as this sustain, except this time it's not followed by an activation, even though we have two phrases. And the reason for that is that we have another overlap at the end. So, this whammy here, no worries about it this time. Kinda hard to identify where this note is, not that hard, but also this has a disadvantage because this overlap is tight. So instead of activating here, I went for the chord after, this red-blue chord, and this gave me the the overlap every time. And instead of ending here, we'd end on the chord, so I don't even know if it lost that many points, to be honest with you. And so yeah, that is, and this chord is a strum, I should say, so there was no worrying about whether it's an up or a down. And I'm pretty sure this note's a ho-po. And I strummed this whole thing anyway, but I'll get to that in the notes part of it. So we'd overlap here, end on the chord, and I think I would get 300. I'm not, maybe and something, but I wasn't getting 304, that's for sure. Not with tilt acts. But yeah, that's Farmer Says. At least it's really short and it's over badly. It's over quickly if it goes badly. But I don't think I played this. Actually, I think I won this every time I played it, ironically enough. But yeah, there we go. Besides the match against Preston, but that obviously didn't count to anything. Okay, now we'll move on to the notes. Okay, now we'll take a look at the notes of Farmer Says, like the thing, 1 minute 50, even shorter in fact. This one, kind of similar to the thing as well, because I would give the tip again of just paying attention, but there is some things I can at least go into a bit more depth, mainly at the end, but we'll just look at the main riff first, because I'm sure to anyone that didn't play bass on console or whatever, or just hates open notes in general, this sort of thing can like almost be unfathomable. Maybe not that bad, but you just don't know what to do. If you really want to do, you could just play that. You could do that on a loop and do it 1,000 times and you get it. But the main gist of it is just everything's on downs except for this last green-red chord, which is just two strums, and that's an up. If you really want to, you could do a double down to make it on a down strum. But that's a bit. It sort of ruins the flow I found for me. The real problem with this is that there's a red-blue chord sandwiched in between two open note ho-pos. And if you just remember that that's like basically the extent of the difficulty of the open notes, we could probably make that a lot easier. Don't know why I'm missing there. And this stuff is okay if you just remember that for some reason there's, because most of it's in sets of two strums, there's one part where you have to strum like an extra note, so all in twos pretty much, and then for some reason after this red blue there's no hammer on. So remembering that that's the way it is there, just make sure you not miss it basically. What am I doing? And this is easy at least. So the main riff doesn't change at least. And before I do the solo, main riff 2 is the same. I'm going to look at the outro because this is something that even to me are just a bit of a mess. Like you can break it down, but if you use every hammer on, you can see that green, open, open, yellow, blue, that would end up being on an up strum, which is awkward. So it's doable that way, but I opted to just strum everything. And normally Clone Hero, if you do it at the right time and you don't like rush it or go too late, Clone Hero will be alright with that. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I mean even the bits, the little lick bits in between the the main line, or whatever you call it, main riff. And then that little bit at the end is fine, to be honest. So yeah, I think one of the main keys to strumming through parts that have a lot of hammer-ons is just being really steady with your strumming, making sure you're trying to like be on the BPM as much as possible, not trying to stray from the BPM. So if I like I mean, Clone Hero almost allows anything, to be honest, but I think keeping steady will keep you on track and stop the overstrums as well. Okay, so that's the bookends. The solo, there isn't too much to talk about, honestly. I'll just play through it, and if there's anything I have to say, I'll say it. I guess this part can come out of nowhere, but if you remember that it starts off with just a regular blue to open, back to a blue, and then it goes into the sets of threes, it should be okay. Then I guess those chords are something that sort of exists. But if you just stay in second position for those chords, that should be fine. Easy stuff. Once again, easy, but you will be whammying these chords. What have I don't know why I missed that. Then probably the most notable chords, right there. And then that stuff is slow enough to one hand, right? Okay, so I guess I'll briefly look at these chords here. So I do like a sort of very subtle position shift in the middle of that. So I'll just go up to it again. I start here on the measure. Just so I know what I'm doing as well, I'm going to slow it down. Right, so the position shift happens after this red-blue chord. Very subtle. So basically, instead of just anchoring this, and then doing a shift there, which is more awkward, you just watch. So immediately after that, red-blue, just play like this, and basically just putting my index finger on the red immediately after that. So you could say I'm doing it a bit like this, where I've got two fingers on the red note, and as soon as I let go of that, that red's ready to go there, you're already in second position. And then self-explanatory after that. And that sort of thing can be very useful for a lot of chord shifting. And I think that sort of thing, these really subtle position shifts, a lot of it came from playing note shuffle a lot on Rise of Rock. But yeah, honestly, there isn't really much to say about this. A lot of it is just sixteenths, the occasional open note, that if you pay attention, as I was saying, you can hit. But yeah, that's all there is to say about Farmer Says, so we'll do a run of it. Okay, so that was Farmer Says 303k. I got to imagine that's the best score I've ever gotten there. I think my tilt acts were decent enough to warrant that, but 1k of optimal, and that was, that would be what I would do in a tournament. So it's hard to beat something like that. But anyway, Farmer Says done, and Strum Song's done. So we'll move on to the hybrids, which start off with Superheroes. Okay, so here we have Superheroes and the path for it. This one, it's relatively long for a tournament song. I think it was like 4.5 minutes or something. Maybe closer to 5. But as far as the path goes, it actually was pretty alright. There's a few things that can trip you up, but we'll just go straight into it. So the first thing we'll see, we have these whammies. All of these sustains are pretty short, and even in the next phrase there's a short whammy. So a bit like The Thing is the best example of short whammies. These ones are a bit easier though, because they're all back to back and the tempo is a bit slower. So yeah, it's just a case of getting as much as possible. When it comes to this second phrase here in this whammy though, I opted to not whammy this note, and the reason for that is just because the next one is an immediate act, and since I obviously use the button, going from the whammy bar to having my finger over the button in a relatively short space of time, plus these notes are kinda weird with this open note, it made it a bit too much to handle, I guess you could say. So I just got rid of this whammy here and lost, I guess, 400 points or something. It's not the end of the world. This song, it could come down to the wire, but it never did for me. So yeah. The good thing is, it is an immediate activation, and there's no overlap at all, so this first activation is very easy to remember, just after the open note. And I believe, yeah, it's on a down strum, so no worries there. First activation is A-OK, second activation, even easier. The only thing here is we have this whammy here, and really easy to remember, it's just the fast part of the first solo. So yeah, as soon as we see this descending triplet activate, boosh. Generally ends around here. Maybe this note if we get lucky with the whammy. All of this whammy. I don't know why I'm just focusing on this note, but yeah, there's a whammy all the way through this phrase. Excuse me. So yeah, this activation, pips dead easy. Next phrases, both of them have whammy, same as the first phrase, this one with the shorter whammies. And then we have our big solo activations. This one's worth a lot of points. It says to activate here. I decided just to activate on the measure, makes it easier, and I generally still ended up like the start bar would end on the grace note at the end. So I'm losing 400, but I'm still not getting a bunch of sustain or anything due to the lack of early whammy. Yeah, so after we activate here, the only thing we need to remember is that there's a phrase pretty much straight after that has a decent amount of whammy, and that's definitely worth getting, because the stuff here is it's fast notes, and probably the most valuable activation. It's either that or the last one. But yeah, not bad so far. The worst one's been the first activation. So, fourth act, more whammy, simple whammies, nothing to say there. So it tells us to activate right here, and the activation will end one note shy of this relatively quick phrase here. So as you'd maybe expect, if I got good enough whammy here to outdo this pass, because it's a no early whammy pass, it was possible to overlap. I never did it in practice, but much like Farmer Says, in the match with Preston, somehow I must have been whammying out of my mind, and I managed to overlap this phrase. So from then on, instead of activating on this open note here, activating like a bar earlier in the middle of the sustain. I just saw it toward the tail end of the sustain, so I think right here. And this maybe is the only instance of activating somewhere that isn't a note. I think in Universal Mind, but I'm not even going over the tiebreakers, but as far as regular songs, activating right here is maybe the only one where I'm not activating on a note. Like, and this, I'm not counting times where I'm like tilt activating and just by chance I don't hit the note at the same time I activate. But this one intentionally activated at the end of the sustain, so we don't overlap here. So yeah, extra points on this pass if we end right here as well. And it's always going to look like you're going to overlap, but you just got to go for it. You can't be hitting this note later because it'll throw you off the riff afterwards. But anyway, we will get this phrase without overlap, and even if you do overlap, it's not the end of the world, because this last phrase you can whammy it enough to get star power out of it. But obviously, not overlapping is much more beneficial because we get more of this like pure 16th notes at the end. But this last phrase, whammy the hell out of it. These sustains aren't that short, the BPMs get slower, so these sustains get longer as we go along, so we can get more whammy. Well, strictly speaking we get the same amount of whammy, but it's just easier to get that whammy out of it. Yeah, we get this really long note. Plenty of time to prepare for the activation, and it says to activate right here, but that's just because it's the earliest time you can activate this, and I'm pretty sure you could activate anywhere in this whole thing, as long as you do activate before the end. So yeah, instead of activating here, I generally just activated on the orange note. Easy to identify, but it doesn't matter. It could just be any point after this, I guess after this blue note, right? No, not the blue note. Yeah, this is literally the where it starts shipping the 16th, so yeah. Any point after here, and before whenever you would be losing points. And so yeah, that's the path for superheroes. 611. I don't know what, I can't remember what I was getting. I think it was closer to 602. That doesn't sound right though. I feel like I shouldn't have been losing that many points, but I'll see when I do a run of it just how much I was losing out on. But yeah, we'll go on to the notes now. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes for superheroes. Now this one is mainly going to come down to just looking at each of the solos, pretty much. There's not much else outside of that. There's at least one thing, but I'll talk about that when we get to it. So anyway, guitar solo 1. This one's fine, it's just one-handing. You have your activation right there. Otherwise it's just sliding up and down. There really isn't anything particular that I do. It's just, if I want to slide, I'll slide. If I don't want to, I won't, so that's me sliding. If I don't want to, I'll just extend and hit the oranges with my, like that. Obviously there's parts where you have to slide, but that's the easiest solo, really. So if you can't do that, you're probably screwed for the entire song. But anyway, guitar solo 2. Now there'll be a fair bit to say about this. Starts off with pretty quick strumming. So you see there, it might not be that easy to tell, but right at the end of it, it switches to 3 triplet notes. Right there, 3 triplet notes. So yeah, if you remember that's there, you won't overstrum there, because I'm pretty sure even though it is Clone Hero, if you just do 16th throughout, it'll probably will overstrum. Or not, because it's Clone Hero. And you see, it sort of comes at a weird time there. You see, I got it wrong and I recovered, but yeah, it's sort of like not quite 2 measures of it. It's like 2.5 measures of strumming. And then that's fine. And this I stay in first position for this. Because sliding too much for me in a tournament, I don't know, it just made me feel uncomfortable. And I'll side up for the last one like that. Well, that's guitar solo 2A. That one's, it's pretty okay if you can strum this fast comfortably. I mean, slower than Ties That Bind, for instance. So that strumming will end on a down, I might as well add. Okay, that's the easier of the two halves of this solo. Guitar solo 2B, I'm just going to play it first. Okay, so it's a bit of a mess. You start off with this first half of it. So just looking at it, it's not, there's no real patterns in it, it's just, for some reason it's not taps, even though I'm pretty sure it's tapped, like on a real guitar. And one-handing this is what I used to do, which is viable, but for me, doing that in a tournament setting, it just sort of wasn't consistent enough, because there's a lot of random missing gaps in the notes. So I opted to standard tap it, as I do with the second half as well, but it's a bit more complicated there. So as I say, just look for the highest note, and even then, when you're coming back down, it can screw you over, but I swear that was a lag spike. So if I do this really slow, because a lot of people don't standard tap anymore, so I'll just show what I'm thinking. I'll do it super slow. So look in there, blue is the top note here, then it's orange, orange, then there's a blue I can see, then it's an orange, another orange, another orange, orange, blue, blue, yellow, orange, yellow, blue, blue, yellow, 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 yeah, 25% speed, orange, blue, and I wouldn't tap this last yellow because it's a sustain, it just makes it a bit awkward. So I'm looking for the highest note of a certain like phrase, I guess you could say. And it's all in first position. Right? For some reason I'm missing that, I don't know why. And there's at least one part where I can ghost a bit, which is where right there, where I can just do a quad zig instead. So I'll just point that out again. It's the sort of thing that happens in chasing the light that makes it so awkward. So there's a red note followed by a descending quad. And without this extra yellow that you can anchor, it makes that really awkward to do without ghosting. It's what makes stuff like this hard in Rock Band. So yeah, because we're in Clone Hero, we can ghost the yellow there, and no penalty. And as I said, there's no pattern, so there's no method other than standard tapping. Like stuff like this, you can just do any speed really. I mean, I can't tell because the hyperspeed's so fast. Just standard tapping. And it's such a useful tool. I don't know why people laugh at it so much. It means you don't have to learn methods for this, and you don't have to rely on one-handing if your one-handing isn't that good. It's just an extension of your arm. That's what tapping is on real guitar, right? People aren't doing alt zigs on Stratocasters, are they? So yeah, this stuff, like, it's too much to remember. With this, I just don't have to remember anything. I just go in thinking I'm standard tapping this part, and I can just identify where the highest note is. You know, that's all it is. Just tapping the highest note, nothing else. And just hitting everything else with your left hand in first position. No sliding, no nothing. It's the easiest way you can do it, really. But anyway, that's the first part. Now I shouldn't set the marker here because there is one thing I want to say about this orange sustain that goes into the second half of the guitar solo too. So for me it was a bit weird if I tapped and strummed this. It just felt a bit awkward there. So what I would do, I'd one-hand this and then double tap the blues. So I'm sort of doing tapping underneath the note I'm held. Okay, so there is a position shift in this one. There doesn't have to be, but it just makes it a little bit more comfortable. So I'll slow it down once again, and I'll point out the notes that I'm tapping here. So yeah, right here. Double blue, orange, 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 blue, blue, orange. Obviously blue is this part, you know, it's just obvious. Oranges, pretty obvious again. Blue, double yellow, yellow, blue, and this is where the position shift is because there's no more greens after this. Blue, blue, orange, blue, blue, yellow, blue, orange, if I feel like it. I don't have to tap that last note because it's the last note there. So a bit faster now. position shift. Okay, and other than that, it's just getting up to speed. You can identify which notes you need to tap, you just need to do it quick. And then that last orange, you can bring your hand down or not. And I'll do it all in first position just to show that that's fine as well. It just makes doing these little ziggy things on the red, yellow, blue a bit more awkward. But it is very possible. Just because your ring finger has less strength than your middle finger. That's the only reason for that. But yeah, that's solo 2. I'll play the whole thing again. Just see it in action. Oh yeah, let's play the full song after that. Let's just pretend I hit that, hey? Sometimes it happens, you just have really stupid misses and there's nothing you can do about that. You can concentrate all you like. You can hit all of this and then you just miss some random thing that you didn't even think was a problem. But yeah, it shows that at least the hard parts are consistent, huh? But yeah, that's solo 2, so we've gone through solo 1, solo 2. There's one thing I want to go over before the end. It's going to be the very end of chorus 3 here, and this is probably something I should have said in the past. And it's a reason you might turn off tilt for this song. Now sometimes that helps if you have like some fast shredding that you could accidentally tilt in. And this goes right here for this trill. First of all, remembering it's even there can be a challenge, but yeah, it's very easy because you just get star power just before this trill. It's very easy for me at least, so well, I wouldn't be in third position, but you know what I mean. So my neck can be vibrating quite a bit, it can accidentally tilt. So this part I was just really cautious with. I try to like hold my neck down. And yeah, and if I do it with a pinky, it's pretty much a guaranteed tilt. So it's remembering that that's there, and that's a reason you could turn tilt off, because there are no tilt activations in this song. So that would get rid of that problem, but I didn't do it because I don't know. But yeah, that's just a little side note about that. Then we have this section, ending suites, which includes some chords for some reason. So whammying, no problem. And we'll set our RJA section, and I'll just play it first. And this activation here, this whole section alone is worth like 100,000 points, maybe a bit more. So if you're particularly adept, you'll notice that I'm not really staying in first position at all. I'm sliding like any time I get the chance. I mean like any time. I'm only in first position to hit the green notes. Now I never shift into third position even though that could work. And I guess the reason for that is that there's some kind of large leaps from that would be from third position all the way to first position. And you know, your pinky and ring finger can hold on to be alive long enough just to hit the bits there at the top. But having said that, this is still a missable section. Because as I say, there's no method. I'm just one-handing it. And I didn't opt to standard tap this because it's just too convoluted with the patterns that there are. Like that pattern, I guess you could call them like reverse hooks. That sort of thing is really stupid to standard tap. So I'm just one-handing it and sliding up beyond first position whenever I can. I'll demonstrate that at least, what it would look like to standard tap. So there's a lot of ghosting. This part right here, really awkward. It would make like the quinzigs more consistent, but it's really not. They really aren't fast enough to make sliding up and down much of a problem. And that's the end of the song. So there isn't really anything else to talk about for the rest of it, I don't think. So we'll go on to a run of it right now. Okay, so that was Superheroes 606K. I think this song varied a lot due to the whammy, and I'm not sure if this was a consistent score at all, but at least hitting the notes was consistent. So yeah, I think anywhere from 602 to like 606 was about what we were getting. Maybe this was a bit higher. Maybe I got 607 once, I really don't know, I can't remember. But anyway, we'll move on now to the next hybrid song, which is BGM 6. Okay, so here we have the path for BGM 6. Now this one, I think, was pretty balanced in notes and path. So this one has a lot of activations, and this is also the song that has the most tilt activations for me. You see, most of the song is just straight up 16th strumming with very few breaks, and there's a few awkward activations in it as a result of that. But yeah, we'll start off with the first activation. It's a good place to start, and it's pretty simple compared to the rest anyway. So yeah, 2 phrases, no whammy, and all we're doing is looking for this. It's a green-red trill, but they're in grace notes, and we're activating halfway through that. The actual activation says to squeeze in this red note instead of activating on the green, but it's a bit unnecessary. This song really isn't close, not most of the time, unless you get double FC, which is really rare. So yeah, just activating on this green note instead, probably ending a note shy here. It's getting a squeeze instead, because you can see it's really not much difference in note length, I guess. No gap between these notes, should I say. So yeah, activating on this green note. Didn't strum it, but just felt comfortable pressing the button at the same time as the green note was hit. So yeah, first activation, not bad. Second activation is also pretty okay. We have this long whammy phrase here, which is all easy because it's all taps, and all the sustains are really long, so that's nice. And people, I guess, will be tempted to activate as soon as these 16ths came up, or on these quads, or something like that, but there's too many breaks for this to be really worth that much. You can see it's like an entire measure break right here, or another measure break right here. So the actual activation is, we wait until we see this descending trip, then an entire measure to prepare for it, and activate on the next note. And the way this one pans out, if my mouse would like to work, excuse me, the way this one pans out, we overlap this phrase right here, which isn't a problem if we get like any whammy at all. Well, we need enough whammy because it's an entire measure extra, but there was no problem overlapping this. It overlaps, and we end on this note, or this note, but we end just as the notes slow down to triplets here, so it's like a perfect activation. We're getting all 16s, and it ends when it comes to 8th triplets. Okay, so nice, pretty easy activation. And then we get into the tilting. So the good thing is there's no whammy in the middle of all this strumming, so that's fine. And because it's all 16ths, it generally doesn't matter too much if you activate late or whatever. It's just a case of not getting a squeeze. But anyway, this next activation, 2 phrases, and it's an immediate act, so I was just looking, waiting for this second phrase to come up, and then I would start tilting, and it would activate straight away. Not much to say there, we're just tilting as soon as the phrase comes up. Next activation, another 2, no whammy. And what we're looking for here, it says to activate on this yellow. I opted for this measure green here, because getting this squeeze is not going to happen really. And the way I was tilting, it would probably activate a bit earlier than the green anyway. But yeah, the way to remember this is it's the last cycle of this first chorus bit, I guess you could say. So you can see the chorus starts here, measure 94. Right, and this is the next one. You can see it's just stacked on top of each other. Cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, cycle 4 of the first chorus. So yeah, we're aiming at tilt right here. Next phrase, we get 2 whammy phrases, pretty simple whammy phrases. I guess you could maybe miss this orange wall bit, that's what I was always worried about, just because it's a phrase, you feel more pressure, but never ended up going that way. I did miss this phrase though, but less said about that the better. But yeah, easy whammies, easy whammy. Sort of fast transition from whammy hitting this note here, but you do have half a measure, so it's not all bad. Either way, you're activating on the first note of the strumming again. So yeah, 3 tap notes. Boosh. Very easy to remember. No overlaps or anything. And that's all that can be said about that. Next phrase, once again, we get 2 phrases with no whammy. And this is relatively soon after the second phrase, so it's not too bad to remember. But what we're looking for here is halfway through the last cycle this time, is where we're activating. So where we would activate here previously, so if we go up, we can see the chorus starts here. First cycle, second cycle, third cycle, fourth cycle, and 149 is halfway through. And this is pretty much where it tells us to activate this time, rather than being late. So you're halfway through this last cycle, and this is a very valuable activation because we have a lot of these chords. Well, we have the same amount of chords, but we also have triplets which are worth pretty much as much, and then this trill, which is probably worth more. So this is, I guess, the most valuable activation in the whole song, and also like the hardest note part of the whole song, which is annoying. But yeah, it's still worth activating here because if you do hit it and you don't activate over it and instead wait to get some more 16ths or something, I mean this part is as awkward, so definitely best to activate here. And yeah, and then we actually only have one more activation. We have some whammy in the solo here. Fairly awkward phrase here, but yeah, whammy. And it says to activate right here, but that creates a very tight overlap. I found I couldn't get this overlap if I activated here. And because it's the last phrase of the song, you don't really want to be ending up with like half bar as the song ends. Even though this activation isn't worth that much. It's probably like the least valuable activation in this song. But yeah, it's still worth overlapping here. So I think I delayed it, not even to here, I think I literally delayed it to the measure 176, just to make sure. And so we're getting a lot of slower notes, but as I say, it didn't normally come down like to like even a few thousand. At least if you're FCing, you normally won this song. So yeah, in fact I think that's the case. Only me and Chris FC this song in the tournament, and every time that happened we'd won the match. So yeah, considering we didn't play against each other in the pool 2, you'd hope so. But yeah, I activated here, safely got the overlap. Got some of this lesser stuff that's worth less, but at the end of the day, the score I was getting, you see optimal 684, I was only getting out 680, so about 4,000 off optimal on a song that's worth like almost 700,000 points and has this many notes and this many activations. It's pretty good. So if I was FCing this, I was set basically. And yeah, that's the path for BGM 6. We'll move on now to the notes of it. Okay, so here we are with BGM 6. We're going to take a look at the notes of BGM 6. This one I think a lot of people hated for one reason or another. For me personally, the reason I didn't like the chart as much as it could have been is because of these green-red chord taps that are really awkward to do without overstrumming. So I'll be going over them along with a bunch of other things. For some people, strum stamina was a problem. For me, that was okay. But we'll just look at it bit by bit. Intro. Immediately it starts off pretty quick. And I happened to miss the first note, I don't know how, but no. So I opted to just one-hand this bit. And I guess the reason for that is because we have an activation in this section, and we also have a transition into those said chords right here. And I guess I'll get the chords out of the way right now. The way they happen so many times throughout the song, it's like 20 times, I don't know if that's an exact number, but they could be like 20, 25 times if you include the times they happen like twice in a row instead of 4 times in a row. So yeah, I'll just go straight to them. This part is just sliding down and one-handing, there's not really anything to say. And then a trill here. Okay. So, I use the first tap as a hammer-on, and then alt strum through the rest. Still doing it in gallops, but not reset strumming, because reset strumming will definitely give you an opportunity to have Explorer backlash or just an inadvertent overstrum. And there is no instance in this song where I do not use the first tap, because you never know how Corneo is going to screw you. So yeah, and that's how I deal with every single one. There is no circumstance in which I do not use that. Always ends on a down strum on the last one. So that's the chords out of the way. These trills, they are just trills. There is a kind of awkward transition from this trill up here, but it's not too bad. And if you really wanted to, actually that's just after an activation, so you probably wouldn't be able to tap that unless you did the tilt act. So yeah, it goes green, red, orange, blue. Of course you could always just ghost note and slide up like that, but it's not too fast to be that much of a problem. So that's the intro covered. Next thing to talk about, I'll just take a quick look at these like orange and blue walls here. So I opted to one-hand them, just because there's a double green you have to strum. That'd be kind of awkward to use the tap notes there or do teleportation. Not consistent enough. So annoyingly enough, it's not that long of an orange wall, so it's not that bad. And the blue wall is fine because you can just stay in second position and there's no pink involved. It's almost just a red-blue trill. So that's that bit. That happens a couple of times. Not that much of an issue really. Post-chorus, this has the quads in it. Slow enough to one hand, I find. You slide into the first one, and then anchor green for that little blue-green at the end. Okay. Now, as far as the verses go, and pretty much the majority of the song, it's just 16 strumming. So from here, you just 16 strumming for a while in doublets, and it's basically all in doublets. Now, I don't think there's anyone that would be burst strumming in. I mean, you could do that, but this will wear your stamina out a lot quicker. There's no way you'd be able to keep that up through the whole song unless you, I don't know, muck or someone. But yeah, there's nothing to be said here really. One thing I used to do, and I still kind of do, I try and hook the inside of my elbow around the corner of the XP, and that somehow gets me like makes me be able to tense more and gives me more stamina for some reason. So with stuff like this, I could probably do it. I mean, I think the reason I'm missing here is because of the note speed being like 15. But yeah, doing that gives me, like, I don't know, it's not vibrate strumming, but it sort of gives you unlimited stamina. But yeah. Other than that, there's open notes in between, but the open notes aren't really much of a problem. And you do get these occasional breaks, like these triplets here. So yeah, one of the best things I ever heard about getting stamina is something that Alf said. He said, so it was like Existo Vulgare or something on Rock Band. It was like, listen, if you can't do it, just force yourself through it a few times and then you'll be able to do it. And it's amazing how true that is. Like, if you feel like you can't get strum stamina, all you need to do is just keep doing it. You might not be able to do Pillars of Mercy, but like, I went from being a poor strummer, in my opinion, I had no strum stamina, to being able to do like everything. So like Rebirth was no problem now, and I've done like Nevermore 110. So I now consider myself a good strummer, and that just due to that tip of, you know, if you feel like you can't strum for that long, just keep doing it, and you will be able to do it. And it's stupid how it works, and it does work, seriously. If you don't believe me, try it. But yeah, so that's how you could possibly gain stamina for this song. But this song is kind of like 15 NPS or 14 NPS, so it's not that fast. It's more just how long it goes on for, rather than the speed of the strumming. So yeah, there's nothing really to comment on. These alt chorus bits have the chords at the end, you could hear it there. So I'll just show how that works, because last time it was from taps into the chords. So what I'm doing there is I'm literally, after the last doublet, just dropping a note and then doing, I guess, another doublet in the chords. Every time. Never strum the first one, because you'll overstrum. And even if you think you do it at the exact right time, Clone Hero will find a way. Now, there is something to say here where it just randomly slows down and speeds up, so it's worth remembering that the tempo changes back to normal after that one short strumming bit. So that's just a little thing as well. Okay, the hardest parts of the song, and what I'm going to do, the solo is nothing by the way, but this breakdown section is definitely the hardest part. Right, I'm just going to include this as well, because the chords are sort of part of it. Right, so we'll talk about that bit first in the transition. One hand these triplets I do, so you're basically hitting in the zigs. They're not that fast, and considering you're transitioning from strumming these chords, it sort of just makes it more consistent rather than having to rely on teleporting. So yeah, it is possible to do, but I just prefer to one-hand them and then get my hand prepared for the trill. Okay, so and strum the first note of it, just makes it easier. Then we have the trill itself. So how many reds are in this trill? I've never actually counted. So there you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's 11. So yeah, instead of tapping 11, definitely tap 12. And that is a necessary teleport. I mean, I guess because it's 11, you could probably one-hand it if you were Jarvis or someone else, but not me. See, originally I thought that was 13, but it's 11, so 12 is enough. And then, as far as teleporting goes, you just gotta teleport. And it's a pinky slide up to the orange after that, so that's kind of awkward as well. So you're doing a trill, more natural rhythm, 12 taps. It's basically making it a 16th note trill. Then straight into, and the reason it's easier to end on 12 than 11 is because the last tap is going to be with your fretting hand, so you can have that one note buffer, as opposed to boom, and the next note is already a strum. Okay, so we'll do that once more, and then we'll move on to the breakdown B, I guess. Okay, we have this mess. And it's the same every time. The only thing that changes is the transition into it, but it's, you know, it's the same thing. So the way I do this, first one, as normal, we use the first one as a tap, then strum twice, and I'll slow this down actually so I can do this while I'm thinking about it. So I do 2 strums, then use this green, use this strum because you're already holding down green red, so you can't overstrum. So I guess the key here is use the first tap note of the green-red chords as usual, except for that bit, but that's kind of obvious. And use the green tap at the bottom of the trips. A little bit faster. And that's how that goes. And I guess it would be worth saying that I think I do actually reset strum these ones. At least the ones that start on a down. And there's another potential pinky slide into the solo, but it doesn't have to be that way if you remember that the first note of the solo is an orange. So now I'm going to do the whole breakdown now. As far as the solo goes, ironically enough, it's the easiest part of the song pretty much. It's just basic taps and there really isn't anything to say about it. Besides maybe solo A, where it has this bit where you want to strum red taps. But obviously if you just do that, strum 2 reds per like note at the top, you'll be fine. And then the song ends. The song ends with these triplets that it's probably kinda, you can forget that they're there, and I have done that once. I think it was on a practice run. I got rid of an FC on these notes. But yeah, probably strum the first note of them and then just 3 one hands. You'll be fine. So that's BGM 6, and we'll do a run of it. Okay, so that was a BGM 6, 680k as I was saying, the usual for an FC. Some weak whammies here, some strong whammies there, but that's just how it goes. Anyway, next song is Dads.
Okay, so here we have Dads and the Path for Dads. Now this song was sort of infamous. It was definitely more of a notes-based song than a path-based song. Normally if you're the person that hit the most notes, you're the one that won the song. So your path, although it mattered, it didn't matter so much, not as much as an extent as a song like The Sentinel or Farmer Says, something like that. Definitely more about hitting the notes. But it did have an optimal path, believe it or not, and so we're going to look at it right now. So, our first activation. We have this easy tap note stuff to begin with the song, and we want to get pretty much enough whammy from these two phrases to have 3/4 bar by the end of the second phrase, because then we get another phrase and we should end up with full bar after this last phrase. And then we're just holding on for full bar until the next phrase. And it says to activate on the blue note to squeeze it in, but I didn't bother. Obviously it's just a lot easier to activate on this green note here because it's on a measure, and you know, it's just easier in every way really, and you probably end up ending at the same point because you're on full bar. The only difference is you wouldn't be able to squeeze in this open note rather than squeezing this blue. But obviously this song didn't come down to who can squeeze. Wasn't a squiz off or anything like that. So yeah, better to activate right here on the measure in terms of just being consistent. Also we have an overlap here that's I think fairly tight, so definitely best to activate here rather than here, because missing this overlap will cost quite a lot of points because you're getting just pure 16th triplets throughout this activation. So yeah, the first act is pretty fine to be honest. Second activation. We got one whammy right here, nothing notable about it really, another phrase here, and then the optimal act is acting right here. Now, with this one I went for a tilt activation, and the reason for that was, you see we have this triplet strumming right before it that leads into the du-du. So, although it's definitely possible, because you have a little bit of a break between this one and this one, it's definitely possible for me to get my finger over to the button in time, because I wouldn't have my finger extended during the strumming. Triplet strumming is just a bit too strange for that. So I would have it underneath the strum bar, and that transition I guess is possible, but probably not consistent enough to do it every single time. And using the button, if you miss this, you probably want to activate here, but this screws you over because you'd end up overlapping this phrase, which is something you don't really want to do. So instead I went for a tilt act, so I was tilting pretty much as soon as we got to this first one, and it would end up being somewhere in between here and here, no, not really any later. So a safety act if you will. But I'll reiterate it once more, this one didn't come down to the wire really ever, so perfectly fine. Yeah, and then we have this phrase here, relatively quick set of notes, but not too bad. So yeah, 1, 2 phrases, and then the next activation says to do it right here. I delayed it because this is sort of a very arbitrary spot in this like section that's very similar all the way throughout. Instead I just delayed it to the next phrase. So it's on a measure, it's on a star power phrase, you can't miss where the activation point is, and I don't think it would cost you that many points. You have this bit that's triplets instead of what is basically 16ths with, although there are some triplets, but the entire measure isn't 16th triplets over here. So I don't think you would lose that many points, but you definitely lose some points. But that's just the price you pay for having an easier activation spot. So yeah, right here I went for. Now this phrase I didn't whammy at all, and the reason for that is because I'm just tapping the entire time, and I don't want to force myself to teleport. It's just to get these whammies in a in an activation that, you know, it matters, but it's worth just being more consistent for me hitting these notes. So I opted not to whammy any of it and just prepare for the tapping instead. So yeah, no whammying this phrase. This phrase perfectly fine, this phrase fine, and immediately after this phrase we have an immediate act. So right here, it's a yellow strum. Easy enough to remember. It's at the fast part, if you will, the fast part before the triplet strumming. So fairly easy to remember immediately. Don't tap this part anyway, so nothing wrong with that. No danger of overlapping if we activate right here. So we have this phrase and this phrase, which you whammy a bit. Excuse me. And then as far as this last activation goes, I actually didn't remember where it was at all. All I would do was basically just wait until this phrase finished, and then just wing it, like maybe activate. It would be anywhere from like here to here. I would normally want to try to activate before this double chord here, because that's, I don't know, worth the most points in the first least amount of time. So yeah, just somewhere around here, and then it would end before the song ended. So, you know, maybe losing 400 points, one chord, not the end of the world. But yeah, 643k was the score. I don't know what score I was getting. I actually never have seen this in practice or in the tournament, so I don't have a baseline score of what this path alteration gave me, but we will find out. And yeah, we'll move on to what is the most interesting part of this song, the notes of it. So we'll get over there.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes for dads. Now this one, most players I think found this one to be the hardest of pool 2. For me personally, it's the hardest of pool 1 and 2, and one of the hardest of all 3 pools of songs. So yeah, there's going to be a fair amount to say about this one. The one thing is that a lot of sections repeat, but the absolute hardest ones don't repeat. But either way, we'll get into it. There was nothing to say before Bridge Solo 1 into Dad's, like, what are these sections names though? So, the bit before this, the riffs of Saturn, those bits are pretty fine, it's just relatively quick fretting, but nothing that has any I can say anything about really. So Bridge Solo 1. Okay, so pretty quick all the way through there. I think the majority, well, the strumming is obviously in its triplets, which is relatively awkward, and then the fretting part might be in 30 seconds or 16s. I guess it would be. Oh, I would check right now. Yeah, that's got to be 30 seconds. So the way I do this, I tackle this bit. It's one-handed, just because of the transition into the strumming. And what I do, I shift into third position to start it off. And I never use my pinky in the entire thing. Because it's really fast and most of it's just at like triplets basically. So it's a case of changing your position and doing descending triplets with these 3 fingers. And there is the one bit that's like just 2 notes. There. Like directly in the middle. But it's the same thing, you're ranking red and hitting yellow. And to do it while speaking is not as easy. And this is one of the hardest parts for me. Right, and as far as the transition into the strumming goes, it's just a red sliding down to the green. And I wouldn't obviously one finger the whole strumming bit, but this is still quite awkward for me, this part. I'm not sure why I missed there. And as far as the strumming itself goes, you're basically looking to anchor, well not anchor, accent every 6th note, so every other set of 3. So you see it's green, red, yellow, blue there, so you'd be accenting the greens and accenting the first yellow. But even then, it's so fast you might not end up accenting. But that's just how you think about it, rather than thinking about like every single set of 3 shifting between downs and ups. And you can just strum through it, to be fair, because it is Clone Hero. But best to like actually try and do it in 3s. So that's the first fast part. Next part that's worth mentioning is not actually this part itself. But this transitions into the next section, so it's definitely worth setting one right here. So I'm going to set it here. And this is the main fast part that looks a bit stupid. And for all intents and purposes it is stupid. But I'll break it down after doing it. Okay. So we'll just break that down. Actually, I'll slow it down. So as soon as I hit those 2 chords and I do this descending bit, I'm going to get my hand ready to tap. So I'm going to be tapping here, and we can see what I'm going to be doing. It's a bit like the part in immediate results. So I'm just going to be tapping the blue and yellow here. So that's the gist of that very first bit. All in first position. I'm just tapping the highest note, and then I obviously have some ladders there. So standard tapping for now. All in first. Right, at this point where there's two of these ascending quads in a row, just one hand those 2 because it makes the transition into these ladders a lot nicer. So pretend we hit them. And then what we're going to do after we hit that second chord, we're going to be anchoring green. And then the method for these ladders is literally, so with this hand, tapping hand, orange yellow, then fretting hand, blue red, so da da, and then literally just yellow blue, yellow red, sorry, so da 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 da. And this is a pattern that happens in a lot of these Buried Alive songs or Rings of Saturn songs. Then standard tapping this, and then shift into one-handed for these last strum notes here. So yeah, standard in first, one-handing these ladders down, back to standard tapping for this little bit, one-handed here. And then that's the whole thing. So there's a lot going on there. Obviously it's just muscle memory. Excuse me, what the finger got in the way? I'm not sure where that's missing. And once more for a good look. Okay, so that's that part. That's the first weird part. Hopefully it made sense. So then we have this section, which I'm just going to talk about really quick. These transitions from the yellow to the chords. You could do this whole part like in first position, but at least doing these blue yellows to the chords using the pinky for me is a little bit awkward, so I opt to just do a middle finger slide to the red into these chords. And I'm sorry for sniffling so much because cats make me sneeze. So it's a middle to red slide every time. So that's just a little thing about that. Okay, next thing to talk about is the solo, and this is actually the last thing to talk about, so there's not as much as you would think to talk about here because a lot of it's repeated, but the hard parts are hard enough that it makes the whole song pretty difficult. So I'll play through it once. And this part can be inconsistent with the method I use anyway. Yeah, proof that it works. So, we start off with this basic trill. So there's nothing really to say there, we just hit it like a trill. I just standard tap it. And then we get these mini trills, and I standard tap these as well. So specifically, one yellow, and the rhythm is da 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 da. And then as far as these hammer-ons go, I either standard tap them or one-hand them out, just depends on how I'm feeling. Doesn't really matter. And once again, this is all in first position, to stop any position shifts. It's just standard tapped. Easy enough. Just relatively quick tapping is all it is. Right, and then this is all one-handing, and I'll set the position to here. Then we have this absolute mess of notes, which is the hardest part of the song. So I'll slow it down, and I'll do my method first. So there's a couple of double taps in there. There's no double one-handing, but there are double taps. So, provided you know how to tap ladders, and also like downhill ladders, so ascending and descending ladders. I'll just go through it, explain it like this. So we start off with a double tap, and then hit the ladders downwards as if it was normal ladders. So starting off with a double tap, blue orange, like this. Okay. And then after the first four, we do basically, it's another double tap, so it goes double tap, single, da-da. So we're only using our fretting hand for one of the first five, like bits. I really don't know what I call them, but yeah. So double tap, fret, tap, tap, and then on this second tap, we're just doing a regular ladder down. So this first half. And then the slow ladders up are literally just that. I just play them as they are, just to keep my bearings. And I guess the one at the very bottom, it's a double tap at the end, a double one hand, should I say? I don't know why I said there was no double one handing, because there is double one handing. All right, and this one starts off the same way, but double one hand and just a regular ladder up. Double tap, double one hand, double tap, double one hand. Okay, so that's how that part's done. And the entire time the green's anchored. And at full speed, this has big potential in this. Just like that. If you're not completely perfect with what essentially are your zigs, it might eat a note. But this is at least a consistent way and pretty much getting a -1. Or SC. SC as I missed more than one note. Alright, so that's how I hit the solo part of Dads and the full solo and everything else. And that's all there really is to say about Dads. The parts that are hard, but everything else is pretty much self-explanatory and there's no reason why I'd miss it. But I would say a good 50 to 60% of the song is missable, which is a big reason why a lot of people banned it. I banned it at least in the first match, or did I? I'm not sure if I banned it or Nick banned it. Someone banned it. But yeah. Anyway, we'll do a run of the song now. Okay, so that was Dad's 634k, almost 635. I don't remember what it said optimal was. I think it was in the 640s. So this path wasn't exact. I know my last activation, or my second last activation in particular, because it doesn't have any whammy, loses quite a lot of points there. But as I said, this song mainly came down to hitting the notes rather than, you know, the pathing itself. So anyway, this is good enough as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, the next song is the last song of Pool 2, and it is The Temple of Hate.
Okay, so here we have the path for the Temple of Hate. Now this one was definitely one of the most path-based songs, I would say. It's pretty easy to FC compared to the rest of Pool 2, and as a result of that, you know, double FCs were very possible, and did happen, and scores did come down to the wire in this song, even for me. I say even, but, you know. So yeah, we'll get into the path for it right now, this second. Seems like the best time to do it. We start off with activation 1, fittingly, and we have this easy whammy, pretty micro whammy here, but the main part of this activation that's annoying is this sustain that leads into the activation right here. So it's happened many times before where we have a whammy followed by the activation, so I do what I normally do, and I went for the tilt act after the sustain. Now this is a really long sustain, so I wanted to whammy as much of it as possible to get obviously as much star power. Ideally close to full bar, maybe even full bar, although probably not full bar, because if I got full bar I would be able to stop whammying. So yeah, we'd be approaching full bar after this measure, and just going for the tilt act. There's nothing else to say there really, just trying to tilt as close to this note as possible, because the activation ends over a sustain, so we'll be missing out on 3 points, hundreds of points, as opposed to, you know, if we activate right here, that's 600 points gone. We're not getting that much from just sustain. So yeah, trying to tilt as quick as possible here. The worst activation in the song, which is good. Next, we actually hold on for quite a long time. This song is like 5 minutes long, but only has 4 activations. A bit like Waves, strange in that way. So yeah, long sustain, easy whammy, easy phrase, more easy whammy. And our next activation says right here, I opted to try and activate on the phrase, but once again this is a tilt act I used. So the reason for this time it being a tilt act is because it's during a tapping section, and I tap these notes. They aren't overly fast, but just for consistency's sake I tapped them. So yeah, I went for the tilting while tapping method right here. Easy overlap. Ideally end around here. So yeah, nothing else really to say there. Pretty self-explanatory. Next activation. So actually I'll sum this up real quick first. We got the first 2 activations are dealing with tilting. The last 2 activations are dealing with remembering where they are. So there's actually no free activation in this song, I would say, but none of them are overly bad at least. So the third phrase, more easy whammy, another easy whammy, and then we have this seemingly arbitrary part in the middle of the string section, I guess it is. And overall not the most valuable activation, but still valuable enough. So the way I remember this, if we count the measures, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we activate on the first note of the 6th. So that's one way of remembering it. It's this blue note, it's the 6th measure from where we start. Otherwise I was just waiting for these GRYB quads to show up again after this pattern. So right here it's 2 measures of this, and then you activate as soon as it starts switching to the red, yellow, blue, orange quads instead. So 2 ways of remembering that right here, and it's a perfect act because it ends right here, if you can squeeze that note in. Okay, so next and final activation, we have some easy whammies again, long whammies, definitely get as much as we can out of these, and then our last phrase actually has no whammy for once. And then remembering exactly where this is, it's not that hard, but still seemingly like it's in the middle of nowhere. So the way how I was remembering this, we have the first cycle, which goes which obviously ends right here. 218 is one cycle, 222 is the start of a new cycle. So you see this part where it's an orange note followed by the double red. You can identify that as quick as possible, and then it's the second time that happens we activate on the orange note. So yeah, orange followed by 2 reds, quick reds should I say. That's our activation point, and it's in the second cycle. So yeah, that's the activation, and ideally it will end right here, squeezing in this last yellow note. If we squeeze the orange, that is. If we don't squeeze in the orange at the beginning, we're not squeezing this. We're squeezing this one in. If we're not squeezing this one, we're squeezing the orange in. But either way, it's better to just squeeze both in, really. And yeah, that's the path for Temple of Hate. It says Temple of Hate. It says right here 557k. Ideally on an FC, I'll be getting about 555. So yeah, not far off optimal at all. These activations just I didn't stray from them at all really. Besides the second one, where I tried to do it earlier by a couple of notes. But even then, it could incidentally land on this note because it's a tilt act. So yeah, 555k. Only 2k off optimal. Pretty good. Now it's very possible to get outpathed in this song, but that's just the way it was. I didn't like picking this song. The only reason I ever picked it was because I wanted to FC all 10 songs of Pool 2. It was a bit like Tuck My Tail. And I actually did end up getting to do this one, but I never did FC Dads, so that was the only missing one for me. But yeah, that is that, and we'll move on to the notes of Temple of Hate now.
Okay, so now we're going to take what will essentially be a brief look at the notes of Temple of Hate. Now, there really isn't going to be too much to talk about this one because the vast majority of the song is just simple, and all we're going to talk about is the solo and one other small thing. So, we'll talk about the main part of the solo, which is this first. And this is just basic standard tapping, just tapping the highest note, and that's really simple. I'm sure people were one-handing this, but for me it's just more consistent, and that's the name of the game, right? So our tilt act is right there. Then it transitions to this a little bit harder pattern. Into these descending triplets. So I can get rid of solo 1A immediately because it's simple. So I'm standard tapping this all in the first position, but the notes I'm tapping are the highest note and the note of the, I guess, zig underneath that. So orange, blue here, orange, blue here. Just anchoring the lowest note of the triangle. So if you don't know what a triangle is, I mean, it's obviously everyone knows what a triangle is, but in terms of this game, so you see you have the yellow, orange, yellow there. It's a triangle of notes. So yeah, anchoring the yellow and tapping the orange, and then you have right after that you have a red, yellow, red triangle. And so what I'll be doing, I'll be anchoring the red and tapping the yellow, and pulling off to the red, and that's basically how this section works. After both triangles, you get an ascending trip and a zig in between, but the zigs are obviously self-explanatory. And I guess the real difficulty is just being able to shift into every type of quad zig there is, especially this one here, the GRBOs. Okay, so that's how that tapping bit works. And as far as the trips at the end are concerned, it's probably not the best method to standard tap them, but that's just what I do, just to keep my flow, I guess. Because it's pretty easy for your fingers to get in the way when you're standard tapping descending trips, so it's perfectly easy to just one-hand them, but for me I was standard tapping them. And probably elbow strumming this last green. But not necessarily, so that was just either way. Okay, so that's solo 1. Solo bridge, there's nothing a note, and solo 2 there really isn't much of a note either. Most of it is just one-handed, just preparing yourself for somewhat awkward fretting, but all of this is just easily one-handed. It's nothing like the superheroes solo where that it makes sense to tap. This stuff, there is no reason to tap. Except right here, I'll get ready to tap. This last bit, which is the same pattern as the start of solo 1A. And after the last one there, of the blues, get ready to whammy that last sustain. So I guess we'll look at 2C again. So when we hear this chromatic sounding bit, I'm ready to tap. Stop, whammy. I guess I'll include the note after so you can see the whammy. Okay, and that's the solo, so I'll do the full solo just so you can see, because why not? All in first position. All one-handed. There is a little mini chill there, but it's not even particularly fast. Getting ready to tap as soon as this hammer-on phrase comes up. Stop. Then the whammy would be there, but I didn't select the section. Okay, so that's the solo covered. And there's one other thing that's really short that I'll look at really quick, and that's this thing here. So basically, the entire phrase, like set of notes in this part, normally goes from a chord to a single note. But there's one instance where it doesn't, and it was worth for me to remember that this little da-da-da at the top was there. And in that case, we're just holding orange and hitting the notes below. So this was just one little thing that if you forgot it was there, it could screw you over. But not particularly hard to hit. And that is it for the Temple of Hate. Now, it was one of the easiest songs in either pool, I would think. I think people would agree with me. And it was basically a pathing test more than anything, and a squeeze off, if you would. But yeah, that's that, and we'll do a run of the song now. Okay, so that was a Temple of Hate 555,990. So actually about 1k of optimal, because optimal is like 557,048 or something like that. So this is a particularly good run. I think people, at least someone hit 556 in the tournament. Maybe it was Moose, maybe it was Nick. I'm not too sure. But yeah, a good run, all things considered. So yeah, that is the end of Pool 2. So we'll be moving swiftly on to Pool 3, which has the most interesting things, the most interesting songs. And that starts off with Track on Fire. So we will see you there. But for now, farewell.